The prayer will be offered tonight by the wonderful delegate from Anne Arundel County.
Let us pray. Dear God, thank you for all that you do for us every day. Thank you for all the individuals who help us every day. Thank you for all those who are home, who are watching, who are hoping, who are praying for us to do our best for them. Thank you for our families who understand the sacrifice that we make. And thank you for our speaker. Will you continue to bless her, guide her, and strengthen her as she guides us, blesses us, and strengthens us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Everyone is here from the back. While I wait for people, may I have Morgan, Melanie, Andrea, Jeannie, Janae, and Vanessa up here, please? Everyone, please reach your seats. The clerk will call. Everyone's in? All right. Everyone's in? Yes? The roll. There being 127 members present, the House is now in session. The clerk will read the journal from the previous day.
Annapolis, Maryland, March the 28th, 2026.
Recognizing the Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So be considered the reading of the journal.
So order petitions, memorials, and other papers. Colleagues, can I just have 1 second? So while we were doing second reader, the wonderful human beings behind us ordered the pizza, waited for it downstairs, all those boxes. They brought them all up for us with the help of the troopers, but they did all that work, and I just want you to say thank you to them, please. And that is, you have Melanie right there, you have Morgan, you have Andrea, you have Jeannie, Vanessa, okay? Did I miss anyone? Oh, and Janae, all of them, they take care of us, right? So I want to say thank you to them, and also the troopers who are here late, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. I want you to feel the love, okay? Thank you. Thank you. And I know we thank them often, but it is 8:24, and we have people in DLS, the amendment office, the clerk's office, people in our committees that are doing this work for us to get us ready. And I want us to, and the people on the floor, OIS, everyone, every single person that helps us do this work. Thank you. So we're going to have a long night, and I just want to set some ground rules. We're going to have a lot of amendments. I want you to introduce it, say your argument. I'll go to the floor leader. We'll go back and forward a few times. We'll take the vote, and we'll move on. We're going to listen and be respectful, okay? And that's all I ask. All I ask, okay? Thank you. Quorum call.
Madam Speaker.
Did everyone eat? Yes? Okay.
Did you eat?
Yes. Thank you for asking. Melanie, make sure I ate. Thank you so much. That's very kind. The clerk will take the call. There being 126 members present, the House is still in session. For those of you that are following at home and here, Those of you that have your computers, we're going to do Senate third reading calendar number 89. The clerk will read the first bill, please.
Senate Bill 791, Correctional Services and Public Safety, Immigration Enforcement, Prohibitions, Community Trust Act.
Senate Bill number 791 is on third reading and final passage. I see you. Are there any amendments to the bill as to its title? Is there any debate? I'm going to start by recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam
You're
Speaker. I have
welcome.
an amendment of the desk, 793626/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
Thank you, Madam
You're
Speaker.
welcome.
We talked about this bill for an awful long time. We're going to talk about it longer, both in amendment and in the merits of the bill and the third reading final vote. The majority leader said earlier in response to some colloquy that he and I had that absolutely no one who is charged with a crime in the state of Maryland, the fact of charging them with the crime, coming within the custody of our law enforcement officials, being detained pre-trial for any crime whatsoever, will justify or allow our law enforcement officials to communicate, cooperate, provide information to our federal immigration authorities, any crime. And that's a position of very absolutist totality that you cannot have any communication, cooperation, information provided to lawful federal immigration authorities until you are convicted. What this amendment does is it excludes situations where an individual has been arrested for homicide. Obviously, been arrested for homicide and been held. What does that entail in the real world? Well, 99 times out of 100, probably 99.9 times out of 100, what it entails is that there has been an investigation that a judicial officer has already determined that there is probable cause to charge an individual with murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, attempted murder, manslaughter. Those are the general classifications with a few nuances to them of homicide. People do not get charged with homicide just for the heck of it. That doesn't mean to suggest that sometimes people don't plead to lesser offenses. That doesn't mean to suggest that every once in a while someone is found not guilty. The standard for guilt in a criminal court versus probable cause to charge and hold you is different. We all understand that, or we should. But at the end of the day, we have had, unfortunately, here in our own great state of Maryland, multiple people, Harford County, in the Washington metropolitan area, in the Baltimore metropolitan area, multiple within the last few years. And they're almost all women, unfortunately, who have been murdered by someone who was here illegally. In some cases, by someone who is not only here illegally, but also has a criminal record here in the United States. And they have not had a second chance and a third chance. They have had multiple chances. Because I've said this many times here on the floor, and I'll say it to my last day. There are some people who you cannot rehabilitate. There are some people who you cannot prevent from having violent predispositions. There are some people who the society, no matter our best efforts and our best intentions, cannot fix and cannot protect ourselves from unless they are prohibited from being in our civil society, walking our streets the way that you and I can. That's the reality. And so what the amendment does is it says, look, if we arrested you and you've been held, a judicial officer has said there's probable cause to hold you for homicide, and you are held in one of our facilities, we can communicate with lawful federal authorities and say, hey, this individual was here. When we processed him, we found out, or we believe, maybe, as the committee chair said earlier, maybe he or she wasn't telling the truth, but we have reason to believe that they're here illegally and unlawfully. They're held in our facility while awaiting trial for murder. If you choose to exercise your federal authority to take possession and control of them and deport them, within your system that they have control over and we don't, we're okay with that. We're okay with that because they have been charged with murder. And I anticipate that the argument will be, well, it's just a charge. It's just a charge. But at the end of the day, how many of you would like to think that someone murdered or was responsible for the death of someone you knew in your community, in your neighborhood, in your hometown, and you found out that they were here illegally, they were charged, they're being held, you read the account of what occurred, you're not the jury, you're not the final judge, you're not the executioner, but you have some common sense. And how many of you would feel comfortable saying, well, you know what, we're just not going to cooperate with federal immigration authorities? There's a lot of people in this bill, maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, but there's a lot of people in this bill and classifications of crimes that I could agree with. There's a lot of situations where maybe it's not important for our law enforcement authorities to be contacting, cooperating, opening things up with federal immigration. There's a lot of things that maybe we should all take a look at in Washington, D.C. about, is this a deportable offense or not? Is this a person that is capable of rehabilitation? Is this a person who's capable of being a good member of our communities and not? It ain't murderers. It's not. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the amendment. I will ask the body to reject this amendment, and there are going to be a number of these that are similar, but just different crimes, and the arguments will be the same for all. The primary argument, and we talked about this in the context of the 287G agreements, is Marylanders deserve justice in the state of Maryland. So if a murder is if a murder is committed, and we believe we've caught the right person and they're arrested, we want them to go to trial for that murder in Maryland. We don't want ICE deporting them before trial. We want to keep them here. We want that the victim's family and the victim who's been killed to have justice in Maryland. We want them to go through the process, go through the trial, and then when they're convicted, we have put in this law, Maryland will notify ICE, give them notice to pick them up once they've served their sentence in Maryland. That is only fair to victims of crime in Maryland. Secondly, our system is well equipped to detain people on serious crimes. We have judges who do it every day. And we have even added in this bill that if law enforcement believes it's relevant to flight risk or public safety, which are the two criteria for considerations for release, they can tell the judge, please also consider the fact that this person is here illegally or any aspect of their past, if relevant, if the law enforcement believes it's relevant to those considerations. So I think those are the reasons. It is unfair to victims of the state not to be able to see a trial through and to see the person who has hurt them see justice in Maryland. So for that reason, I'm going to ask the body to resist this amendment, and there will be others like it. And in the interest of time, I will be making a similar argument in the future.
Wow.
If I
That's
know
a first.
that's a disclaimer. If I know one, it's okay. That's clever. Recognizing the minority leader again. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I am glad that we are talking about the victims. The victims' families will want justice. The victims' families will want a trial. Although I got to be honest with you, I've represented some people whose relatives, loved ones were killed in horrific circumstances, and I got to be honest, vast majority of them, they don't want to sit there. They don't want to sit there. They may have a hardness, a harshness, a hatred toward that individual that motivates them to want to see that, but the vast majority of them, they don't want to sit there. They don't want to hear about their loved one being raped, strangled, stabbed, murdered, as happened to a lovely young woman in Harford County. They don't want to hear about their loved one being shot, abused, tied up, kidnapped, as has happened to other young women with illegal alien criminals fairly recently in our state. They don't want to hear about it. But beyond that, as a public policy point, I'm thrilled. I hope that this pretends, and the gentlelady from Baltimore City who made the argument has always, I think, in my experience, tried to advocate for victims. She certainly did with respect to eliminating diminution credits for first-degree rape convicts, and I appreciate that. I hope that everybody does that. If this is our new standard, is we want what's best for the victims. If this is our new standard, we want what's best for the victims, It better be the same standard on every damn bill. It can't just be the standard here, but not there. If the victims are why we're doing this, we don't want to deport you because we want the victims to have their say in court. We want the victims to feel good that you're doing 25 to life at the North Branch Correctional Institution in Allegheny County. Then that same common sense perspective, the victims come first, it better come through on every bill. Not just when the defendant is an illegal alien, but when the defendant is a Maryland resident, is a citizen, is a juvenile. The victims better come first on everything, or else it's disingenuous. And I don't believe the gentlelady to be disingenuous. But this body better think about that. If the victims come first today, they come first next year too. There's an even more significant, I don't know more significant, but there's a more reality-based argument too. How much do you think it costs the state of Maryland to try someone for homicide? How many public defenders do you think we have? There's probably half a dozen of them in the Judiciary Committee every week. So we're going to provide this individual who's here illegally, who's been charged with homicide, and so that we can get justice for the victim, we're going to provide them with a free lawyer with your taxpayers' dollars. We're going to go through a multi-day, sometimes multi-week jury trial or bench proceeding, all paid for with your taxpayers' dollars. We're going to convict them. They're going to go to a facility that costs sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to incarcerate them, all with your taxpayers' dollars. We're going to let them be in that facility for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 25, 30 years, and then at the end of it, we're going to call ICE up and say, if you can get here in 48 hours, you can take that individual who's a horrific individual, and we're going to deport them. Instead of just saying, we've arrested them, these are the facts of the case, is the best that we know it, there's probable cause to hold them, they're here illegally now, what do you want to do with them, federal government? That's nonsensical. You're talking about spending literally hundreds of thousands of dollars over the lifetime of an individual charge to keep them here because you say you want to give the victims justice, but the truth is you can't defend that argument. You want to appease those who want this bill, and if you start carving out more and more exceptions for who gets charged, they won't be appeased. The amendment and other amendments to come only address the absolute worst of the worst crimes. We've laid out the intellectually honest argument for it, and we need to have an intellectually honest debate. If the victim comes first, they come first all the time, not just tonight. If you're willing to pay the cost to put someone in jail for 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30 years, and then you're going to deport them, tell your taxpayers that. For me, I'm okay with, if the federal government wants to take control of these individuals, taking control of these individuals and doing what they think, because I don't think that their lives are better or the victims' lives are going to be better if they're deported and subject to penalties and punishment outside of Maryland's system, nor does Maryland have to pay for it. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Move the amendment.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Very briefly. Our position cannot be that in the state of Maryland, we do not want people held responsible for crimes that they commit. Murder. The suggestion that if you follow this logic, we would prefer to save money and not prosecute murderers. We would prefer to have them sent to another country where, by the way, they will never serve time or be held responsible for the murder of the Marylander, the person they killed in this state. So if you vote for the amendment, you are saying, I do not want a person charged with murder in Maryland to ever go to trial, or potentially ever go to trial on that charge. That is the position that I understand has been argued. So for many reasons, but for that primarily, I would ask you to reject the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the delegate from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I do not believe this is happening. The murderers who have killed the women in our state are currently still in our state serving time. Rachel Morin's murderer is here. We're not deporting these people before we get our pound of flesh after what they've done to the women of our state. We are not doing that. So I don't even understand why that has been a repeated argument. It is, I believe, not real. It is not happening. We are holding these bad people responsible already. What ICE actually does is after they've served their time, they are coming to get those bad guys. They're not taking away our ability to punish them the way we see fit. We don't want that either. That's not what we're doing. That's not what's happening right now, and that's not what's going to happen tomorrow. If you look at the list of folks who have been collected by ICE, many of them have had serious convictions. They've been convicted. And just for the record, many of these murderers that we've heard about in the last few years that have killed the women of Maryland are here today serving their time in our prisons. So that argument really falls flat on its face, because the reality of the situation is that is not what ICE is doing for the vast majority of these severe cases.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Madam Speaker, to explain my vote.
Recognizing the gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I agree with the gentlelady from Harford County in that the way that the system works is the person is arrested, charged, and has to face trial. And if found guilty, will serve time in Maryland's prisons. However, if the person is arrested for murder, but then later released for something lesser, under this bill without the amendment, ICE will not be notified. And ICE may know that this person is a murderer from another country. And because of that, I support this amendment. I stand for public safety. As it was said before, so many of the victims in our state have been women who have been brutally raped and murdered. And for my daughters and for Maryland's daughters, I support this amendment.
Recognizing the gentleman from Hartford.
Thank you very much. To briefly explain my vote. Again, talking about Rachel Morin again, her murderer fled Maryland. About 8-9 months later, was discovered in Oklahoma, extradited back to Maryland, where he faced justice. And he's now in prison here. So that's just not true. It is flat out wrong. Walter Martinez, the individual who murdered Kayla Hamilton, both of those were in Harford County. Also, MS-13 gang member, here legally, is serving justice in the state of Maryland. So that's just flatly false. I'll be voting green on the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Very briefly to explain my vote, I do want to read some facts on the record here for those who don't believe that this is going on. There's a USA Today article right here. Some suspects in violent assaults and sex crimes are escaping American justice because they're being deported before they can stand trial, according to a number of prosecutors. In one suburban Denver county, the DA has tallied at least 6 criminal cases he's had to shelve or drop because ICE detained or deported suspects before he could prosecute them. In another case in Denver, a man suspected of attempted murder was released because ICE had deported the witnesses against him, forcing prosecutors to drop the charges. The suspect then tackled an ICE agent trying to detain him outside the jail. So this is what we are inviting if we take this amendment.
The clerk will take the call. There being 85 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the
welcome.
desk. Amendment number 483221.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered reading the amendment.
So order.
So my amendment deals with crimes of violence, and I just want to give a little intro here because I got to be honest with you. The argument now is that we cannot cooperate with federal authorities is because we want to hold people accountable in Maryland is laughable. You know, I know it's laughable because every session, for the 8 sessions I've been here, we've completely dismantled the criminal justice system in the state. We're either dismantling the parole commission to let them out early, we're either changing the juvenile laws to not hold them accountable, we're either adding more diminution credits to let them out early. The idea that you're going to now argue that, oh no, we can't cooperate with the federal officials because we got to hold them accountable here. It's crazy. And I'm not saying your intentions are crazy. I'm just saying I feel Like, that argument is not true. The second piece is that the suggestion the floor leader made that if we cooperate, they won't be held in our facilities and serve their sentence. That also is not true. Now, you might be able to find a county in Colorado that may have let somebody out earlier, but that's not what's happening in Maryland. In Maryland, even if federal authorities are notified, they still serve their sentence in Maryland. But let me get to my amendment. Crimes of violence in this state are the worst of the worst. The worst. Murder, rape, human trafficking, sex trafficking, carjacking. You know, you're familiar. It's the worst of the worst. But I want to point out something in the bill. You had mentioned that you don't want ICE to be involved. This also applies to the Department of Justice. So, for example, in Maryland, the Department of Justice has a human trafficking task force. I'm assuming we don't want to participate with them? So, crimes of violence in our state, and I know because I put in a bill in 2019 that made human trafficking a crime of violence, we're suggesting now that we can't participate with the federal human trafficking task force in our own state? That's what it sounds like. Are you saying that we don't want to participate with them? That they're evil? They don't have our best interests at heart? This is about public safety. This isn't about, and I'll just say this, so you guys know this, I'm half Puerto Rican, my mother is 100% Latina, and she's called abuela. I keep hearing this argument that these bills are out to prevent someone's abuela from getting arrested eating a sandwich on the side of the road. I've heard it a million times from the majority leader. That's why I have an amendment that's about crimes of violence. This isn't about abuela eating a sandwich. It's about crimes of violence. Is this who we're protecting? Right? Is this who we're protecting? The worst of the worst? The people that want to do harm to our families and our community? We should be better than that. And the way I read this bill, besides all of the blatantly unconstitutional language with the fingerprinting and all the other things that are in here, is that we don't even want to cooperate with the human trafficking task force for the District Court of Maryland, for our federal human trafficking partners in the state, according to this bill, because they fall under the Department of Justice. That's sad. Are those evil people? The Federal Human Trafficking Task Force? Those are evil people wishing to do harm in our community? That's outrageous and offensive. We're much better than this. Put a green vote up there for people that are victims of the worst crimes in our state. I move the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you,
You're
Madam
welcome.
Speaker. Thank you again for your amendment. Again, I will again ask the body to resist the amendment for the same reasons, and I'd like to make two additional points. There's nothing in this bill that restricts in any way law enforcement working with the Human Trafficking Task Force or any other federal criminal agency. I think what the minority might be referring to is just language that describes, in describing what a judicial warrant is, making clear that it's a warrant signed by a judge, not a piece of paper issued by an agency, and they do mention DOJ. But it's only in that context of what a judicial warrant is. There's nothing in this bill that restricts cooperation on investigations. There's nothing about not participating in task forces. We will continue to do that. The arguments are the same. We want people to be convicted and serve their time here, and then we codify in this bill what is not already law. We say at the point that they have completed their sentence, we are now requiring that ICE be notified if there's a detainer. So we are requiring that. It's current normal practice, but we are codifying it. Again, so that, as the delegate mentioned, the process is they're arrested, prosecuted, convicted, and they serve their sentence in Maryland, and then if there's a detainer, they can be deported. So that is the way the bill is structured. It protects our system of justice. It protects accountability. It protects victims having their day in court. Again, I ask that the body reject the amendment. Thank you.
Recognizing the maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And in
You're
conclusion, I'll say this, is the reason why there's federal cooperation, and I mentioned the human trafficking, is because some of these cases are multi-state. And the reason, and I presume your background, you participated in some of these things, but the reason why there's cooperation in these cases is because sometimes it's bigger than just Maryland. So the idea that we're just going to be this little island of holding people accountable is just not realistic. Because if you have somebody that has committed an offense in another jurisdiction, in another state, running in a multi-state, sex trafficking ring or labor trafficking ring, you have to work with our federal partners. And the idea that you are explicitly prohibiting any sort of notification or cooperation with them before they're convicted is also not practical in practice. Because they could have been convicted or they could have been charged in a whole bunch of other states. Why would we not want to participate with them? We're cutting off our nose to spite our face in those cases. And that's why there is a cooperation between local and the feds. This isn't just about, rounding people up that don't have documentation. We're referring to people that are committing legitimate crimes. And I mean, are we suggesting that these crimes are not being committed in our state? So I move the amendment for all those reasons. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from Southern Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I rise to support the Minority Whip's amendment here. Before we went on break a few minutes ago, there was some back and forth with my good friend over here from Carroll County and the majority leader, and she was talking about murderers being released. And we were heard that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. You're being dramatic. Well, a quick internet search. There was a case in Prince George's County just last year. Renee Pop Chubb, a 32-year-old Guatemalan national who entered the United States illegally, was deported twice. In August of 24, he assaulted his brother, hit his head. He was arrested for first-degree assault. Later, 2 weeks later, when his brother died, guess what? They ramped up the charges to second-degree murder, second-degree assault. ICE issued a detainer in October for the guy. But guess what? Prince George's County, straight from the court, on April 12, 2025, what is that, like 6 months, 7 months? Released him and didn't honor the detainer while the ICE agent was in the secure area. They didn't honor the detainer. This bill aims at making the current practice in Prince George's County law of the land for the state. So I'm not using some mythological story from the USA Today. I'm telling you facts that happen in our state. This is happening, and it's making our citizens less safe. Nobody will answer the basic question of how not arresting these people and letting this guy, like Mr. Chubb here, out of jail makes any of our citizens more safe. With that, Madam Speaker, I support the gentleman's amendment. Thank you.
You're welcome. Recognizing the delegate from Prince George's County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
And so with regards to the case that the gentleman has decided to bring forth from my county, one, when the guy was arrested, his fingerprints were put into the system. ICE could have came at that point to get him, and they did not. Secondly, and more importantly, under this bill, it would actually require for, if he is being held, for the local detention center to contact ICE to let them know that they are about to release him within 24 hours. That is in the bill. So this bill actually creates a construct that will be uniform all across the state of Maryland for these types of scenarios. And with that, I ask the body to resist the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the delegate from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
Just to clarify, you said that, can I ask the previous speaker a question, please?
The previous
to clarify.
speaker?
Thank you, Madam
Okay.
Speaker. You said ICE could have come to get him and they didn't. What exactly would have been the process for ICE to come if right when, again, that's what I was trying to get at before with the timeline. When he's put in the system, how do they just come and get him when he's...
If there was an act, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, so yeah, I'm trying to figure out the timeline here because when do they just come and get them? I mean, is it going to be in the state of Maryland every time anybody's information is put in the system and ICE has a detainer, then they immediately come, sweep them up, and take them away? Because that's what it's sounding like to me that you were saying.
What I'm saying is that when he was arrested, we've had a long conversation about fingerprints earlier today, and his fingerprints are put into the system. If there is an active detainer already on file for that person, then ICE is going to get notified that he is being held in Prince George's County. They're going to get that notification.
Excellent. So then they can just come and get them.
And it's up to them as to whether or not they're going to go to Prince
Maybe
George's
that's the
County or
solution
not.
then. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the delegate from Hartford.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. So that
You're
is not
welcome.
the way it will work under this bill. If you look in the bill, there is convicted, which used to be covered individuals, convicted individuals. But that gentleman was not convicted of a felony, and he was not someone who was registered as a sex offender. So he would not be a convicted individual, which means a local jurisdiction would actually not under this bill be letting ICE know about him or respecting detainers. Again, that is one of the central problems with this bill. You are making two classes of people. One are the convicted individuals as defined in the law. Don't use just the word convicted. We're redefining what that means in the law. But we're also separating out state penitentiaries and state corrections from local. Your local jurisdiction will not be contacting ICE for any people that are not convicted, as defined by this new law, individuals. That gentleman would not qualify. So that jurisdiction under this bill will not be contacting ICE. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would press the gentleman's amendment as well.
You're welcome. The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker,
Has everyone recorded their vote? The clerk will take the call. There being 83 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the delegate from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I have an amendment at the desk, amendment number 773-921-1.
Madam Number One.
Moves so much be the reading of the amendment.
So order.
So this amendment basically provides an exception in this bill for individuals arrested for first or second degree rape. We've had a lot of discussion, and I am a little confused, especially after the last exchange. So earlier this evening, the answer was, if arrested, not yet convicted, they could be out on bail in the community pending trial. The answer was yes. So these individuals committing rape could be out in our communities to continue to offend. That is not acceptable. Number two, so what is the argument? The gentleman brought up the case in Prince George's County, and we were just told, well, ICE knew, and my friend from Frederick County said, so you want ICE to come and get them? Because I heard earlier that we want them to serve time in Maryland. So if we want ICE to get them and send them back to where they live, or do we want them to serve their time in Maryland? I would say that if somebody is arrested for rape, first and second degree rape, they should not be free in our communities. They should have to stay in jail so they cannot offend again. And once they are convicted, ask the victim if they care if that individual is sitting in a prison in the state of Maryland or somewhere else. I would contend that they would be very happy to have them removed from the United States of America, away from our communities, away from our wives, on our children and our sisters and our mothers so they cannot rape over and over again. And ask anybody on the street. I bet you they would give you that answer. Illegal immigration is often portrayed as a victimless crime, or it's downplayed by asserting that most charges are for nonviolent crimes. That is callous thought process towards victims of these horrible crimes. We have to stop this. We have to do things in this body to keep our families and the citizens of Maryland safe from horrible crimes such as rape. And you talk about, as my friend from Frederick County mentioned, our minority whip. We are not an island in Maryland unto ourselves. So let's talk about a few other rapes. From just an incident February 25th of 2026, arrested March 5th. We have someone from Park City, Utah, Coronado Atrisco, sexually assaulted and raped a 14-year-old high school student who reported that to a school resource officer. Do we want to chance having somebody that would rape a 14-year-old out on the street? I don't. Let's talk about another incident in Suffolk County, New York. Carlos Reneso from Guatemala, indicted for rape and sexual assault of a 5-year-old girl, 5, in Suffolk County, New York. Do we want this person back out on the street to do this again? I don't. Let's talk about New York. Sorry, I already did New York. Excuse me. There's so many to choose from, unfortunately. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Pitt County, North Carolina. Jonathan David Garcia and Lario Zaid Mayan. February 11th of this year. Illegal immigrants. And a third accomplice broke into an Airbnb, attacked a male victim, used a sharp weapon to restrain the victim, sodomized him, removed his fingernails, fled the scene. Do we want these people out to convict that again, to do that again? I don't. January 15th, again, this year, Georgia. Mexican national, Kenneth N. Guzman, accused of breaking into a family's mobile home on January 12th, raping an 11-year-old girl and holding her 10-year-old sister at knife point. Do we want this person back out? I don't. I bet your neighbors don't. So what I am saying is when we're talking about passing legislation like this, who are we thinking of? We need to be thinking of, again, our families, the citizens of the state of Maryland. If they are convicted or arrested for this, they need to be put in jail, stay in jail, and if it's okay for ICE to come and get them, please come and get them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. The floor leader.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I agree with you. Oh, I'm sorry. No,
Yeah, I'll take it. If I may.
All right, recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, I've heard a couple of times over the past couple of days that we're creating a different class of people. And in fact, with this amendment, that's exactly what we would be doing, because the Constitution and constitutional rights apply to everyone who is on U.S. soil. And with that, you get due process rights, and they still apply if you happen to be in the U.S. They even apply if you are arrested. They even apply to U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens. So guess what? You could be a U.S. citizen. You could be arrested for those crimes that were just mentioned, and you could be released. You could be released. You could go home. And you can be amongst children. You could be amongst women. you could be amongst other people that you could possibly rape. But because we have a system that says you have to be proven guilty before you are detained, this bill looks at individuals who have been convicted. With that in mind, there you go. With that in mind, the bill looks at folks who have actually been convicted. And guess what's in the bill? Convicted of a sex offense. So we have taken public safety in mind. This bill carefully balances. This amendment does not. This amendment states that if you have been arrested, whether it is a true arrest, meaning that that you actually committed the crime, or if it is a false arrest, if you are mistaken identity, if you any of those circumstances would still apply under this amendment, and that's quite too far. Now, we do know some individuals who have been arrested for sex offense. One of them even ran for president and is in the White House. So when we say,
let's focus, okay? Come on.
When
Let's
we
focus.
say, do we want to chance it? We have to keep in mind as to what we're saying. An arrest is an arrest. A conviction is a conviction. This bill deals with convictions. This amendment deals with arrests. And regardless, we still have the Constitution that applies, and that is the supreme law of the land.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from Hartford County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise to support the good delegates' amendment. And I'm glad we're talking about due process, because there's a couple people I want to talk about that was murdered in Hartford County that did not get due process. Kayla Hamilton, murdered by a 16-year-old, brutally raped by a 16-year-old MS-13 gang member. He was out on the street. He was the sole and primary suspect for months until the DNA evidence came back, when they could finally charge him. He was in 2 Maryland public schools during that time. And then when he was finally charged with DNA evidence, sure, we're talking about due process, but this individual was proven before he was convicted of committing this brutal crime. Another one I want to talk about, we've talked a lot about, I want to make sure we're talking about, the White House keeps talking about it quite a bit, Rachel Morin, who was murdered in me and the other delegate from Hartford County's district, murdered in our district. And it's important we talk about. We're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of what happened. And I got permission from Rachel's mom to share what police found at the scene. 15 to 20 head wounds, all of which you could see her skull. Strangulation that caused hemorrhaging 3 layers down in her tissue. Injuries all over her body, brutally raped, covered in blood, beat to death with a rock, and she did not die immediately. She laid and suffered for a time before she finally succumbed to those wounds. This is somebody who should not get out. This somebody should not be released once they apprehend this individual, once they arrest this individual. This person's a monster. It doesn't matter what country they're from. It doesn't matter what their nationality. This person's a monster. This person should never see the light of day ever again, even while going through their due process. Because guess who didn't get due process? Rachel Morin. With that, I support the amendment.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the minority leader.
I have to correct the record. I don't mean to do this. I'm sure the gentlelady from Anne Arundel County simply misspoke. The President of the United States has never once, never for a moment, never for a second, ever been charged with sexual assault in a criminal court. Ever. You can file a civil suit against anyone you want for anything, and it has a totally different standard of proof, and it doesn't require any criminal investigation or any prosecutorial influence. But I do think that when we say they're sex offenses and the inhabitant of the White House, whether you like him or not, he was charged with sex crimes, he was not. He was not once, not ever, and we should make that very clear. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
To explain my vote.
Recognizing the lady from Baltimore County.
Thank you very much.
welcome.
Yes, I appreciate the minority leader standing up to clarify that because we do know there was a president in the White House who did have some issues with an intern. And I don't think he was charged either. But I'd like to talk about a man from Honduras, 20-year-old Honduran, who was convicted of second-degree rape in Maryland. He was in the Howard County Detention Center, and he was released back into the community twice. Right here in Maryland, it happened last May. So this is a good amendment. We should require not an hour notification for ICE to come pick up one of these bad guys, but we should make sure that convicted rapists are deported from this country if they are illegally present. Thank you.
To explain my vote, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the lady from Hartford County.
Thank you so much,
You're
Madam
welcome.
Speaker. I just want to remind the body that it is very hard to convict sex crimes. I really shouldn't have to, particularly for my colleagues on the Judiciary Committee. We know that it is extremely hard to get convictions. It is so often a he said, she said. And so there may be some cases, and I understand we found a small handful of them from a jurisdiction nowhere near here, out in the West. But here in Maryland, it is extremely hard to get convictions in these cases, and ICE knows that. ICE knows that a lot of these guys are bad guys, and they shouldn't be here among us, and that they are highly likely, because of the low conviction rates for rape and sexual abuse, that it's highly likely that they will walk free. And that is why they come and collect them, not because they're trying to protect them from justice, because they know in these cases justice is almost never served for the victims.
The clerk will take the call. There being 85 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the delegate from Carroll County.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I have another amendment at the desk, amendment number 773-921-1. I'm sorry, wrong one. Amendment number 863-525-1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
All right, this amendment provides for an exception for individuals arrested for crimes against children or domestic violence. So we weren't, we're not worried about, I guess, as much about the rape. Let's talk about children. I'm not going to repeat everything. But again, as we spoke about, a lot of times these folks are arrested, and as the gentle lady said, the chair of the committee, you're talking about convicted in this bill. Convicted. That does not happen immediately. And the problem is these people that commit these horrible crimes against our children can be released into the communities to offend and hurt more children. And to say that they'll stay in jail isn't true. I did some research as well. The Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform stated that Maryland has a very high overall pre-trial release rate. Pre-trial release, that means they're out from our local jails. 66%. 66%. Are you okay with that? I am not okay with that. My neighbors are not okay with that. The families who have something horrible happen to their children, our children, the most precious thing we have on this earth, are not okay with that. Let's do something for the innocent children and the poor children that go through something as heinous as this. Let's prevent these offenders from going back out while they're on pretrial release because they haven't yet been convicted and because they get their rights, and I don't disagree with you there. But they should not be out to offend again. So I press my amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Again, the arguments are the same, so I won't take up more of this body's time. I will just add the numbers you're talking about. I haven't seen them, but I assume they're statewide for all crimes. The crimes that we've been talking about in these amendments, these very, very serious crimes, I'm not saying release is impossible. The judges make fact-specific determinations, but they're very unlikely. So I'm sure the release rate for the crimes that are referenced in this amendment are much, 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 much lower. But again, it's trusting our system in which our judges make careful decisions about release based on likelihood of flight and the threat to public safety. And it's about ensuring, again, that our system can work and do its job here in Maryland and that the case can proceed through all stages, including if the person is convicted through the service of their sentence. Thank you again.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Madam Speaker, to explain my vote.
Yes.
So whether it's over the state, across the state for many different crimes, I'm just going to throw one out there, and the reason I'm voting yes, and I'm standing up for children and protecting our children. Baltimore County, a 2024 report indicated that nearly 10% of child sex crimes, that's not all crime, that's child sex crimes, filed in that county over a 17-month period involved undocumented immigrants from Central America. So there's another stat for you that's not all crime, it's children.
The clerk will take the call. There being 86 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title?
Madam Speaker? Big guy in the back.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. I have an amendment to desk. The amendment number is, in the dark light, 1835271.
Amendment number 1.
Be so much consider the reading of the amendment.
So order.
So, a lot of stuff's been said this evening, and I'm concerned,
Thank you,
to say the least, about the process that we're going through and what we're concerned about here. And my amendment is relatively simple, and it deals with crimes for individuals arrested for child sex offenses. We can all watch TV and watch Law and Order and all the other stuff on TV, and we know that these crimes are real. And they're not made up. They just change the names to protect the innocent and the guilty. We had today the fine gentleman from Montgomery County brought his nephew in. And we all were on our good behavior, and I think that he's probably gone home by now, but he could be a person considered in the same light. I worry about the heinousness of these crimes and what they bring about. So what the amendment simply says, very simply, if the individual is arrested for a violation of Title III, Subtitle 3 of the criminal law article involving a minor victim, they're guilty. I shouldn't say they're guilty. They're innocent until proven guilty. And for that matter, ma'am, I push this amendment. Thank you.
You're welcome. Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Speaker, this amendment is a subset of the amendment that we just voted down. So this is captured within the amendment just before this one. So for the same reasons, I would ask that we reject the amendment. Thank you.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
the clerk will take the call. There being 86 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the delegate from Hartford. Thank you for helping me back there.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I have an amendment at the desk. It's 363526/1.
Amendment number 1.
This is a very simple amendment. So I'm not going to get into specifics of it, but anyway, it's basically changing two issues. One is convicted is removed and put back covered in the amendment, because basically convicted means that the person could be out running around the area for a long time, because either through personal recognizance or on bail. The other thing is that basically then the second part of the amendment is arrested as opposed to convicted for a violation of 3-1102, which is sex trafficking. And I just want to say that sex trafficking is a very serious problem, and the victims are very, very harmed. And probably, I mean, we've done a lot of legislation to help people that have been sex trafficked, but the problem is that they have some terrible, terrible wounds, and terrible mental, emotional, and physical wounds. And it takes a long time to cure that, as we know with a lot of people that have been sexually abused. The other thing is that some trafficking happens with children. And so that's another issue. So basically, if somebody's a trafficker, that's a very, very serious criminal element. There's a lot of money to be made by sexual trafficking. Maryland is in a very serious strategic position for trafficking because of the airport, the port, and 95. And we're very small, very, very small state surrounded by other states, and it's very easy to have a great sex trafficking ring and have all these poor people being victimized. People that maybe can't speak the language and they don't understand it, and they're being manipulated. There's children. So, and then if we allow this to continue and we wait till the people are convicted, the problem is that they're going to do a tremendous amount of physical, emotional, and mental damage to the victims. And the Maryland taxpayer is going to be paying to help these people recuperate. And they'll never be the same. They'll always have these emotional and physical scars. So for that, I move the amendment.
Floor leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the delegate from Hartford County.
You're welcome.
I serve with her on Judiciary Committee, and I know how much she cares about this issue. And I also want to congratulate this body for all the work we've done over the past years in creating and strengthening the laws for not only sex trafficking, but also labor trafficking, and creating also regional navigators to support victims throughout the state. So we've done a lot of work protecting victims of trafficking, and I know the delegate who brought the amendment has been a big part of that, so I thank you for that work. But the same logic applies to this as all the other similar amendments, which is that we want the process to play out in Maryland. We want judges to make determinations in Maryland about detention. We want judges to consider flight risk, et cetera, public safety, and we want the case to proceed to trial, and if there's a conviction, we want the sentence to occur in Maryland. For all the reasons, I would ask the body, for the same reasons as I've previously said, to reject the amendment. Thank you.
Recognizing the maker of the amendment. We can hear you. You have to turn it on. It's okay.
I like to be a silent Sam, as they say.
It's okay.
My concern is that what takes priority? We're saying that the rights of a sex trafficker who is here illegally is more important than the people here that are vulnerable, and children are not as important to take care of their safety. We have two different issues here. We have the constitutional issue for the person that came into this country illegally, and both of the folks the gentleman that killed Kayla Hamilton and the person that killed Rachel Morin, they were illegal. They came here several times, and it turned out that actually the gentleman that killed Kayla Hamilton killed several people in El Salvador, and he was a gang member. And then the other gentleman who killed Rachel Morin, he also was a gang member. I think it was MI6 or MI13, okay? But the point I'm trying to say is we are worried about people that have no good intentions, and then we're not worried about the folks that are very vulnerable. So for that, I think folks better need to wake up, and this is a good amendment, that we go back to covered as opposed to convicted.
1 second.
Thank you.
I need people to please listen, okay? Recognizing the delegate from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Welcome.
And just to clarify, I want everyone to think in their minds of the Rachel Morin case. Let's say before Rachel Morin was actually killed, the gentleman that murdered her, like the good delegate from Hartford County said, had already brutally murdered a woman in El Salvador, and they were looking for him, and he came here to get away from that. Then he went to California, another beautiful sanctuary state, and he had a home invasion, and he assaulted a woman and her 9-year-old child, and guess what? He's a savvy criminal. So he's not convicted there either, because he runs. Where does he go? He comes here to our beautiful sanctuary state. Let's say we caught him. Let's say we caught him before he murdered Rachel, before he brutally smashed her in her face and all over her body with rocks in the middle of the day on a hiking trail. Let's say we caught him before that happened. Guess what? Under this bill, he's going free. Under this bill, the only charge we know about, charge from LA, charge for breaking into a home, caught on a Ring doorbell camera. That monster is going free under your bill so he can get out and brutally rape and murder another woman. How many more of these are we going to have? How many more do we want to have, you guys? Because it's not going to be the last one. Because this bill, this state is being watched. We're a beacon. We're telling people, come here, come to our state, you'll be safe. Come and predate our community, predate our women. You'll be safe here. We welcome criminal, illegal abuses in our state.
Recognizing the floor leader, then the gentleman from Baltimore City.
Thank you. I will be brief, but I just want to correct for the record. We have a whole set of statutes that require us to respect criminal warrants from other states or international warrants, Interpol or otherwise. So what the gentlelady was describing are crimes that occurred in other locations. Those criminal warrants are respected. This bill does not touch this. This bill is talking about ICE detainers, which are civil infractions. So I just want to make that clear for the record. Thank you.
Recognizing the delegate from Baltimore City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I was also going to reiterate that point, and thank you to my delegation mate. I think the big problem here is that we're receiving amendments from a place that believes that proving guilty before conviction is a thing. Due process is actually a thing. It is actually a constitutional promise to everyone on these soils. And when we talk about we're talking about people who are accused of crimes. We're not talking about people who have been convicted or proven guilty of anything. I've heard somebody say these people who commit these horrible crimes. We're talking about folks who have never been adjudicated yet. And so what these amendments attempt to do is to create 2 tiers of personhood. That we're going to say that if you are not in suspicion of being an undocumented resident of our state, that you should be cast off to Immigration Customs Enforcement for potential deportation. Let me tell you why that's a problem. The very first felony case I ever represented someone on was a young man named DeAndre. His grandmother was a deaconess at my church. She didn't have enough money to pay me, but I was only a young lawyer, so I took the case on. This young man was lied on by the state's #1 witness, who was actually the shooter in his case. He sat in jail for 16 months. Actually, he was 17 when it happened, and he sat in an adult jail for 8 of those 16 months. He went to trial for 4 days. The jury deliberated for 45 minutes, and he had sat in jail for nothing. Now, let's imagine that DeAndre happened to be under suspicion of being an undocumented person in this country. So what we're saying with these amendments, and obviously this amendment doesn't deal with attempted murder, but they're all the same. What we're saying is that somebody who has been under suspicion of being undocumented, if they're falsely accused of a major crime, they should be cast out of this country. That's not due process, and that's why I rise against all of these amendments.
Recognizing the minority whip.
Well, what you just heard was we should just get rid of pretrial confinement. Oh, was this an argument for we shouldn't hold anybody in pretrial confinement? That's what I heard. Is that what you're arguing? What we're saying...
No, hold on a second.
Hey, you can get up all day, and I'll be here all night. So, first of all,
are you asking him a question?
I'm not.
Okay.
I heard a question.
The delegate from Baltimore City, will you be so kind and let him finish his point, please, and then I'll call on you, okay?
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you so much. And let's keep our tone down, please. Thank you.
Before, I'll say this. It appeared that you were somewhat questioning the motives of our amendments. So crimes do occur. Every one of our amendments says arrested. It says arrested. I know you can read the amendments, right? So what we're saying is there is a concern for public safety for individuals, in many cases, that have been arrested for serious offenses. That's what the amendment says. The bill says that there can be no cooperation unless the individuals have been convicted. Because we can also read, we find an issue with that. That's why we're putting these amendments in. We are suggesting that having that gap between when someone's arrested for a serious offense and to when someone's convicted of a serious offense, that breakdown in communication with our federal partners is a problem for those that are putting in these amendments. That's why we're putting in the amendments. And we've outlined some of those reasons. One in particular is that we do cooperate with some of our federal partners, particularly on sex crimes and human trafficking task force and other things that tend to be multi-state areas of coverage. There is a level of cooperation. They're not calling Donald Trump to work these cases. They're calling the individuals that live and work in Maryland for the Department of Justice, right? There's also individuals that live and work in Maryland that work for the Department of Homeland Security, even though it appears people in this chamber want to just villainize every single person that works for that agency. So I would appreciate not to paint a broad brush over these amendments because we're trying to stick up for the victims. We're trying to stand up for public safety, and we're making our best arguments for that. So that's why we're putting these amendments in. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the delegate from Baltimore City.
Just to address your pretrial comment, I would be hard-pressed to find a judge in this state that would release somebody on bail who has any colorable claim for any of these horrific crimes that you all are attempting to amend into this bill. No. What I'm talking about is if you have serious claims of someone having committed murder, rape, it is very, very difficult, if not almost very unlikely, for a judge to release someone under those circumstances. You heard a statistic about 66% of people being released pre-trial. Only 20% of the crimes in this state are serious violent felonies. And those people have a very, very slim chance, slim to no chance, of being released on pretrial release. And that is a result of the way we reformed bail in this state. So everyone can be rest assured that the judges in this state are not just letting people with actual colorable claims that have probable cause of someone committing the horrific things that the delegate from Harford County talked about happening in his county. Judges don't like to see themselves in the paper having released someone, even refusing to give someone a protective order. We have to act like the judges that are in this state are here to stand on that wall and to protect us, and not for us to be fear-mongering people that may not be documented residents of our state, but certainly deserve to be protected by our Constitution.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the delegate from Southern Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
Judging by the comments of the last speaker, I don't know what information we can give you that would ever change your mind. We are giving you case after case, situation after situation, examples. We are giving you the criminal's name, and you're not accepting it. And then you stand up here and say, well, that's not happening. It is. Over and over again, the minority party has given you multiple examples. Please tell me, what information do you need from the minority party to change your mind? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
All right, the clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
The clerk will take. Everyone is going, everyone's at their seat.
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the delegate from Montgomery County.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, to explain my red vote on this. I have put up a red vote because I believe in the Constitution. I believe in the fundamental principle that we have due process for everyone in this country. And
Let's listen.
Also, as the gentlelady from Frederick and Carroll County pointed out, that 90% of the crimes against children are not committed by undocumented immigrants. And finally, because Jeffrey Epstein was not an undocumented immigrant.
To explain my vote, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the delegate from
Thank
Baltimore
you.
City.
I stand to explain my green vote and to tell you that Maryland leads the nation in sex offender apprehensions by ICE in Maryland. Leads the nation, this tiny state of 6 million people. So for those reasons, I support this amendment.
The clerk, recognizing the delegate from Howard County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To explain my red vote on this amendment, I too believe in the Constitution. I understand our history where rights were given to some but not to all, where folks were assumed that their behavior was criminal without going through any type of due process, and even when arrested, were not allowed to actually go through a fair court process and were lynched even when they were found guilty. So I think it's really important that when we talk about actual examples with real people's names, we think in the full context about all the people born right here in the great old USA who've been found guilty, not simply arrested, for murder, assault, sexual assault, and that the same rules of due process that apply to them apply to people with different sounding names and who were born in different countries. Thank you.
Recognizing the delegate from Prince George's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And in explaining my red vote, I just want to correct the record that there is an inherent assumption that everybody from MS-13 is from a particular country, from one particular country, when in fact, the international cartel that it is, we created it. The United States, in its foreign policy, created it because it was a 10-block issue in California. And when we started to deport certain people, they created an international cartel that spanned countries and created what it is right now. Just for the record and correction.
Recognizing the delegate from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise to support this amendment because I, too, believe in the U.S. Constitution, specifically Article 1, Section 8, that gives Congress and the federal government the authority to establish citizenship rules. And even with that, we're not even talking about, the kids and the little old ladies and all that. We're not even talking about them at all. We're only talking about individuals committing the most heinous crimes. So for that reason, in support of the Constitution, I support this amendment.
The clerk would take the call. There being 85 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I have an amendment at the desk, 23323/1.
Amendment number 1.
So much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
Basically, this amendment includes individuals arrested for committing drug trafficking crimes. And, I'm one of the newer members here. What I look at is a testimony. I looked at the bill, the unfavorable testimony, basically County Council of Talbot County, Harford County, County Executive, Harford County Sheriffs, Worcester County Sheriffs, Harford County Detention Center, Maryland Police Chiefs Association, Frederick County Sheriffs, Maryland Correctional Administrators. This is right off the heels of the governor coming to my city and my county to bring light to one of the largest drug busts in Maryland history. An illegal with the largest amount of cocaine that's ever been seized in Wycomico County's history. When you look at this and you're trying to make some sense of what's going on here, I'm looking at these people on this list that are unfavorable to this bill, and to me, I think they're pretty credible people, and that's really what I have to go on. I certainly can't go on my law experience, but I look at this and I think, somewhere along the way, some common sense has to be applied to this, and to me, I would ask that you would move this amendment because if there's one group of people that we certainly need to target, it's drug traffickers. Thank you.
You're welcome. Recognizing the floor leader.
Thank you. Again, it is late, but this is the same argument. Drug traffickers are it's a serious crime, but I would argue not as serious as murder or some of the other crimes we've been talking about. But again, we have a system designed to hold people accountable for criminal acts or acquit them if they are falsely charged, and we want that system to play out. And if the person ends up being convicted, this bill now requires state correctional facilities to notify ICE after the sentence is served. So for all the reasons already exhaustively talked about, I would ask us to resist this amendment as well.
The clerk would take the call.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, explain my vote.
Yes.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I stand to support the gentleman's amendment. We talk about drug trafficking in this country. Drugs kills over 100,000 people across this country every single year. We need to put an end to it. We need to support this amendment. We need to put drug traffickers where they belong. I support the common sense amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Recognizing the minority whip.
So to explain my vote, my green vote is I'm on the maryland.gov website looking at Governor Moore's press release where he thanked Homeland Security for assisting with this massive drug bust earlier this month in Wycomico. So great press release. You should read it. It's right on the governor's webpage. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The clerk will take the call. There being 84 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
An amendment at the desk, 213-320/1.
Amendment number 1.
So much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we just heard a few of my friends here speak of the drug bust on the Eastern Shore. it was actually it was the largest for Wycomico County, one of the largest for Worcester County. So what this amendment does is it prohibits, it makes sure that it doesn't prohibit a law enforcement agency from participating in a joint task force that includes the Department of Homeland Security. The drug bust I mentioned, 45 kilos of cocaine. It's a street value of about $5 million. That's a lot of cocaine, folks. The investigation lasted 14 months. It involved Mexican cartels. It involved people from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was a pretty wide encompassing investigation. So if you think this went from cartels in Mexico to Pittsburgh, I guarantee all of your neighborhoods here in between would have been affected if $5 million worth of cocaine hit the street. 14 months, a lot of communication with different agencies, DEA, Homeland Security. This would not have been possible without that communication. Without communicating with our federal partners, $5 million worth of cocaine would have been on the streets in our neighborhood. Cash, large amounts of cash, 11 guns. After 88 days, I know how much you folks hate illegal guns, any guns. 11 guns picked up in this one major drug bust. I can't imagine us not wanting to make sure that something of this scale and magnitude doesn't poison your neighbors, our families, our Marylanders. For that reason, Madam Speaker, I ask you to move the amendment.
Thank you. Recognizing the floor leader.
Madam Speaker, this is probably the easiest of the night. Nothing in this bill restricts participation in the Joint Task Force, and we encourage it because, like you, we want our streets to be safe.
The question before the House? I'll give you, go ahead, I'll give you another chance.
I was just going to ask to resist the amendment.
Okay.
Well, I was going to ask you to clarify. It sounded like you wanted to accept the amendment because two vehicles involved in transporting this. One of them was a gentleman from Guatemala that was here illegally in the country. So without the cooperation of Homeland Security, this wouldn't have happened. So it sounds like you're willing to accept the amendment.
No, what I said was the amendment's not necessary because nothing in this bill prohibits participation in the Joint Task Force. We have members of state troopers, city law enforcement, county law enforcement, working with federal agencies every day in Joint Task Force, and nothing in this bill prohibits that. So I ask the body to resist the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? The clerk will take the call. There being 90 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Madam Speaker, I just wanted to make a point of order, please.
Yes.
So I just wanted to remind everyone of Rule 51C, and it states that one copy of each amendment offered from the floor shall be provided to the chairman of the committee reporting the bill. I just want to make sure that I get a copy of all the amendments, please. Thank you.
All right, so if you have not given a copy of the amendments, how many have you not had? Can we go through that first? Recognizing the chair of the committee, will you please rise?
Yes. So I have not had two so far.
All right. So you would be so kind now and walk over to the delegate and give her a copy because you get quite a few. It would be nice. It's sort of courtesy, being courteous.
Thank you.
It's tough to get up there and defend something when you don't know what you're defending. Thank you so much. And I know maybe they're not coming on time, but if you have them, if you'll be so kind and turn it over. Thank you so much, Delegate. Thank you, Delegate. Appreciate you both. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All I would say is generally what the minority party does with the receipt of amendments provided to us from the amendment office and they're ran to us on the floor is we give 2 copies of the small sheet to who we believe to be the floor leader, and then assume, perhaps wrongfully, maybe that those copies, one is given to the committee chair. And so in this case, if anything has not been provided, that's simply inadvertent. There have been, because it's a very big bill, and there's been quite a few different floor leaders addressing different amendments. There may be some of them that are floating around that were not directed back to the committee chair, but I'm sure that we will do that throughout the process.
No, and I'm sure there's no malice behind it, but if you have it, will you be so kind and just give it to the chair, and she'll give it to the proper person, okay? Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
I just didn't feel
I am going to recognize the...
Thank
you.
you.
Have an amendment?
No, I was just trying to save from
Oh,
walking
to
over
give
there.
him-
As
oh.
the good delegate said, I had given my amendment over there. I was going to ask the chair if she received it.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
sir. Really appreciate
Thank you.
you. Thank you. Recognizing the delegate from Frederick, and the delegate, the chair has a copy of your amendment.
Yes,
Okay.
I've given out like 3 of them, but I'll double check with her in here in a second.
Thank
You-
you
You're
so
good.
much.
We're good to go.
Appreciate you. Thank
Madam-
you, everyone, for your cooperation.
Madam Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
Go ahead.
It is amendment number 213729-1.
Amendment number 1.
Moves so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
So my good friend from Carroll County talked about the high pretrial release numbers in Maryland. And during floor discussions, it has been commented many times that sending information to ICE prior to being convicted would mean someone would be deported before serving their sentence here in Maryland. Well, actually, here's what happens in these situations. The following occurs when someone is charged and ICE is notified. They are not deported without the charges being adjudicated and a sentence served. In most cases, what happens now when someone is charged and ICE is notified is that the individual is held at the local level if there is a reason to do so. If the individual is released on bond, ICE may detain them and they will be held in an ICE facility pending trial, outcome, and sentencing.
1 second, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we please keep it down? And if you're going to have a conversation, lower your voice, inside voice, please, because it's tough to listen. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So if the individual is released on bond, ICE may detain them and they will be held in an ICE facility pending trial, outcome, and sentencing. The individual serves out his or her sentence before being deported. So this amendment, notwithstanding any other provision of the Act, a covered individual shall include a person who, while released on personal recognizance or bail bond for a pending criminal charge, is then arrested for and charged with a crime of violence as defined in Section 14-101 of the Criminal Law Article, that for such individuals, correctional facilities shall comply with federal immigration detainers and notification request immediately. It removes the convicted language that we were talking about and returns it to the more, I believe, the more stylistic covered language, as waiting to even notify or talk to federal authorities until a trial is over could take years, and also to allow for the second part of the amendment, which, as stated earlier, we are not asking a judge to look at. We are not requiring a judge to look at immigration status. We are not even automatically giving the judge the full information to make that determination. And so, as the majority leader said, what we don't want to happen is for someone running around after committing murder or committing a crime, and then they are deported before we can put them on trial. Well, this amendment focuses on individuals who are out on bond or their personal recognizance for committing a crime, and they abuse their court-granted freedom to commit a crime of violence. This adds them to that covered list. If they commit the crime of violence while already out on bail, they are a danger to society, a flight risk, and every available resource should be used, including cooperation with federal agency, to remove this individual that as public trust has been broken. Protecting their immigration status at this point directly impacts public safety and breaks that community trust. So we have data from the United States Sentencing Commission that says violent offenders recidivate at significantly higher rates, over 60% more quickly than nonviolent offenders. So this does not give them another chance to hurt Marylanders. They've committed one crime, they're out on bond, then they commit a crime of violence. And what might those crimes of violence, just in case that you are also not a lawyer like I am not a lawyer. Those include murder of the first and second degree, manslaughter, assault in the first degree, assault with intent to murder, rape, rob, or commit a first degree sexual offense, rape, first and second degree, sexual offense, first and second degree, sexual abuse of a minor, child abuse in the first degree, continuing a course of conduct with a child, robbery, carjacking, armed carjacking, home invasion, arson in the first degree, abduction, kidnapping, mayhem, maiming, use of a firearm, and felony human trafficking. So if they're already out on bond, and they commit one of these other violent offenses, they would be covered under the covered part of this bill.
Okay, the floor leader. Thank you.
Thank you. This is very similar, though I will say there's a slight nuance difference because, in fact, we've talked about how incredibly unlikely it is that someone charged with one of these crimes would be released. Incredibly unlikely. But this is a situation where it's, I mean, even far more unlikely because the person has, while out on bail, on pretrial release, commits a new violent crime. So they would be subject to a revocation of their bail and release in the first crime. And we have presumptions in our law. So if someone does commit a violent crime while out on pretrial release, we have presumptions that commissioners may not release them. It has to go to a judge. And judges, I cannot imagine a judge who would, after committing a crime while on pretrial release, would release that person who's been subsequently convicted of a crime of violence. So again, I think it's even less necessary in this situation. I know I have complete faith in our courts in a situation like this that they are able to determine whether the person should be released, and I can't imagine they would in that scenario. But in any way, the arguments are similar. This is an arrest, not a conviction, and we would want them to, again, be processed through our criminal justice system in the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The amendment says this: I'm here illegally. I'm an illegal alien. I'm not a citizen of the United States. I have no legal entitlement to be here whatsoever. Your heart can bleed for them. Your mind can say maybe we should have a different immigration system, but you cannot say they have any entitlement whatsoever, any legal entitlement. Can't change it here in the state of Maryland. Can't change it in Oregon. Can't change it anywhere. It's federal law. You're already violative of the rules of the United States of America. We arrested you here in Maryland. We didn't do anything. You got out on bond. And while you were out on bond, you committed, or you were alleged, you were arrested, you've been charged with probable cause to have committed a crime of violence, and we're still not going to notify the federal immigration authorities about your existence. We still won't cooperate with them. We still won't communicate with them. You're here illegally. We got you once. We haven't convicted you yet. We let you out. Another bite at the apple. We charge you again, crime of violence. We're still not going to cooperate. That is, why? Why? That's just foolishness. Thank you.
All right, the clerk would take the call.
Madam Speaker.
The clerk would take, ready? The call. There have been 83 votes in the negative. The amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the gentleman from Hartford County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
For a purpose of amendment, can I have a couple questions with the floor leader, please?
Sure, the floor leader. The floor leader. Thank you very much. Right here. Go ahead. You can.
Yeah.
You may proceed.
Which one?
Right
All
here
right.
in the front.
All right. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
So my question revolves around penalties and consequences for violating this proposed law. Could you speak to that, please?
Sure. If you look on the bill, the penalties and violations are generally associated with the facilities, whether it's a state facility or a local facility. And on page 5 of 8, it describes that in an action brought under paragraph 1 of the subsection, the court may issue a temporary or preliminary or permanent injunction relief to prevent an act that would constitute a violation of this section. And so in essence, we want to stop the action. We want to stop the action.
But what's the enforcement act? What's the enforcement? What's the penalties?
It would be a violation, and so the court, there's no, and if you're looking for some type of civil penalty against the individual, there's no civil penalty against an individual that comes out of this legislation.
No civil penalty on individuals.
An individual can bring the complaint and get the relief, as well as the attorney general.
But against an individual, say against a law enforcement officer or against a corrections officer individually?
It's focused on stopping the entity from performing those activities and continuing to perform. So let's say it's the sheriff in the correctional system, then the penalty would be to stop that sheriff from continuing to perform that action.
But let's talk about a scenario. I'm not trying to go back and forth. I'm trying to really understand this legitimately. So say a corrections officer is out at a bar one night, and plenty of conversations, happen in the evenings around here too, right? And they're talking shop, and an ICE agent happens to coincidentally be there. And here's the conversation saying, hey, we got somebody here illegally. It's being held for this crime. Technically, under the writing of the law, correct me if I'm wrong, that would be a violation of this, correct? That he is somehow communicated with a federal immigration officer, sharing that information. Is that correct?
The individual should not share that information. And then at the end of the day, the request would be that they not, an order would be issued that they not continue to do that. So it would be retroactive. It would be ongoing. So if I'm ongoing doing something that I'm not supposed to do, that's when the restrictive order would come in place.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thanks for answering my questions. So, Madam Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
All right.
26322-7-1.
Amendment number 1.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
So what my amendment seeks to do, seeks to give individuals qualified immunity when they are acting in good faith, right? They're not acting in bad faith if they're talking with their spouse at a restaurant, talking about their day, and someone happens to overhear it. That's not bad faith. There's not a person here that doesn't talk to our significant other about our days, right? Because that's part of having a relationship. There's lots of things that can happen inadvertently during these processes. These folks have lots of contacts with lots of individuals, and they may be acting in absolute good faith. And if at no fault of their own or just through happenstance, they may find themselves in violation of this law if it comes forward. And we want to make sure we're protecting them from civil penalties. We're making sure we're protecting our local governments from civil penalties, meaning the AG or this individual, the remedy for this is suing our local governments, suing our state government. The remedy isn't, holding people accountable through criminal penalties. The remedy is giving these individuals more tax money. I'd be very curious to see what the full fiscal note would be on this bill. Probably pretty high, potentially, right? And again, we're not saying people are going to deliberately violate this law. But there's going to be people that inadvertently do. And we want to make sure our men and women in law enforcement and men and women in corrections who may, in good faith, accidentally cross the line of this law, which is pretty broad and pretty vague, and make sure that we're not putting them individually in harm's way. There's a good intentioned amendment, not challenging the law, trying to make sure we're protecting good actors who are responsible for following this law. With that, Madam Speaker, I would push the amendment.
Thank you. Recognizing the floor leader.
Madam Speaker, I would ask the body to reject this amendment. As I stated previously, quite frankly, it was contemplated to put some type of civil penalties as the maker of and the sponsor of this bill. It was contemplated, but we did not. We actually pulled that out. And we pulled it out because, in essence, the objective is to ensure that the activity does not occur. And if it does occur, we put a provision in there so that the individuals who are participating in an agency or the agency itself would be held accountable and enjoined from doing that. But nothing in this bill talks about civil penalties for either an individual or an agency. So I ask the body to reject the amendment.
Recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
So I rise to support the amendment, and the reason for it, and I know the floor leader and I had a brief discussion offline, here's a great reason why this amendment should be accepted, is that the CJIS fingerprinting card, so let me explain. In Maryland, anyone that is arrested is required, it's required to fill this card out. All right? It's a requirement. It's a federal law. And in the card, you have to fill out place of birth and country of citizenship. In the bill, it explicitly says you cannot ask for place of birth. And so my point in this is that you're going to have people working in correctional facilities or in booking that are going to unknowingly fill out this card because it's a federal requirement, and now they're subject to these penalties in the bill. And so what the amendment is saying is that if, in good faith, one of our Maryland residents who works at a correctional facility or in a booking facility fills this form out, which is a requirement by federal law, that we're not going to hammer them. I think that is reasonable. It's reasonable to do that because we got an issue. The fact that we're about to pass a bill that explicitly prohibits you from asking the place of birth, and yet there is a federal document that explicitly requires you to ask the place of birth. How can we pass a bill with that conflict? And so that's why this gentleman's amendment is so important. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. The clerk would take the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Actually, you got it. There being,
Hold on.
go ahead, take the roll. There being 90 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk. It is amendment number 603221-1.
Amendment number 1.
So much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
All right, so I have a pretty simple amendment here, probably not as controversial as some of the others. I'll be very brief here. What the amendment does is just basically ensures that our correctional facilities, even after this this bill, can still share gang-related information with federal law enforcement, even while the bill attempts to limit some immigration cooperation. Very simple.
The floor leader. Majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to ask you to reject this amendment for the simple reason that I don't think anything in the bill does stop the sharing of the gang information that you are seeking. Further, I would say, even if it did, I would just point out that the gang membership as a point of deportation now has a very questionable history, I think, in Maryland. I think when I met with the ICE field director a year ago, he swore to me that their gang validation method was totally foolproof. And months later, the Kilmar-Abrego-Garcia case, which has been mentioned on the floor, came up. And that's one where he was picked up outside of Home Depot for loitering, got partially ID'd as a gang member because he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat, and that led him eventually to CCOT, as we know. So again, the gang membership as the source alone, as a point of deportation, I think it's questionable. It's part of the reason why this bill starts to do things like require a conviction. But to allay your concerns anyway as to what you're trying to do, nothing in the bill stops creating suspected gang registries and things of that nature, or stopping our counties from participating in that.
Well, thank you. Then, well, hopefully that should, that makes me feel a lot better. If you can guarantee no agency or legal counsel is going to interpret these restrictions as limiting or sharing gang-related information, then, withdraw the amendment. Thank you.
All right, the amendment has been withdrawn.
Madam Speaker?
Yes. Thank
Madam
you.
Speaker.
Thank you for working it out. Appreciate you. I have the gentleman from Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have
You're
an
welcome.
amendment at the desk.
Go ahead.
Amendment number 763627-1.
Amendment number 1.
So, if you look at page 5, the bill, lines 4 through 7, it reads, "A state correctional facility shall provide written notice to federal immigration authorities of the release of an individual who is the subject of an active immigration detainer within 48 hours before the release of the individual." So this is a simple amendment. With this amendment, I'm just changing the language from within 48 hours to at least 48 hours. So why do I feel like this amendment is important and it's really needed for this bill? So with this amendment, we'll ensure that federal authorities, they'll truly have 2 full days to make it out to our correctional facilities and pick up an individual who is the subject of an active immigration detainer if they choose to do so. And my concern with keeping the language as it is, as it's stated, within 48 hours in the bill, is that we could possibly end up with a situation where...
Let's bring it down a little bit, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
As I was saying, my concern with if we keep the language as it is, where it says within 48 hours, is that we could possibly end up having a situation where a correctional facility could potentially provide notice to ICE 2 hours before the individual is set to be released, and they could say something like, well, we're required to give you notice within 48 hours before they're released. We did it at hour 46. Good luck with getting over here in the next 2 hours to grab this guy. So I think this amendment captures the true intent of that section of the bill, and it's going to really make sure that our federal partners have 2 days to grab these dangerous individuals who are the subject of an active immigrant detainer before they are scheduled to be released back onto the streets of Maryland. So with that, Madam Speaker, I move the amendment.
Thank you. The floor leader, the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
We actually had extensive discussion about this amendment, and I do actually understand exactly what it's trying to do, but there's a reason, it turns out, why it's phrased the way it is. So one, we have a constitutional concern that if we explicitly say we are holding people beyond their term of confinement, we're going to run into an issue with constitutionality, and that's been flagged in prior legal advice, so it's why we didn't say it that way. Having said that, it is the practice that when a detention facility notifies ICE about the release date of an individual, and ICE says they're going to come get that person, it is the practice for that person to be held until ICE can come and get them. Again, that's what the actual practice is. So as to why we wouldn't just change it to say at least, well, one of the reasons is you might have someone serving quite a long sentence. And if you say at least 2 days, that could mean a lot of things. At least 2 days could be totally unbounded on a 5-year sentence. And that's unhelpful for a couple reasons. One, simple human error, and you hope people who schedule something 5 months out, that date is actually still good and that they're going to remember to do it. And we were trying to push things closer to the actual release date so that they're getting notified when they can actually come get that person soon to when that's happening. The other point I would make on this is that ICE now has a very large budget, larger than the state of Maryland, and they actually have quite a number of additional staff that they are ramping up here. And I'm not being sassy when I say if our concern is actually the violent criminals, they ought to start with the people that we are putting into this bill here, who are actually the murderers, the rapists, and focus on making sure that they are there when we provide the release date before they start doing any of the other things. Frankly, that would be my prioritization, but I certainly can't force that upon ICE. So for all those reasons, I think this amendment is unnecessary.
The clerk would call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? The clerk will take the call. There being 89 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title?
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from Western Maryland.
Thank you. I do
You're
have
welcome.
an amendment at the desk. It is number 903624/1.
Amendment number 1.
Thank you. I think this will be the easiest amendment you've heard yet to date, although I haven't heard the remaining 10 or 20 amendments. So page 5, lines 4 to 7 read, a state correctional facility shall provide written notice to federal immigration authorities of the release of an individual who is the subject of an active immigration detainer within 48 hours before the release of the individual. This amendment is quite simple. It strikes the word written. Removing this one word promotes timeliness and operational efficiency. Release dates in correctional facilities can be set with little notice due to court orders, sentence recalculation, or administrative issues. Requiring written notice may delay that communication. Everyone has a cell phone. Why can't that local correction officer use that phone and give the federal officer a call? The same message is conveyed. In cases of emergency releases, court-ordered discharges, or expedited transfers, compliance with a written notice requirement may be impractical. And it's my understanding that federal immigration detainer regulations generally require notification of release, but do not mandate that such notice be in written form. A state law requirement exceeding federal practice is therefore unnecessary. Furthermore, facilities can document oral or electronic communications in internal logs or databases, preserving an evidentiary record without requiring the notice itself to be written and formally transmitted. For these reasons, I move the amendment.
The committee, the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
Well, let's see. We'll consider this a friendly amendment.
Okay. There you go.
Thank you.
So the question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're
I thought
welcome.
my friend from Western Maryland wouldn't do me like that and now make me look terrible that I can't get my friendly amendment. I appreciate it. I do have an amendment at the desk, 113321/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
Throughout the entire debate this evening discussing various crimes and the processes and how it works,
Let's
I think
listen,
that
please. 1 second.
we need to
Minority
keep-
leader.
Thank
1
you.
minute. Let's just listen, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I think we need to keep something in mind. We should, if we're going to do this policy, if for the very first time in, again, all the years of Maryland, we have to do it. 3 days ago, no one in this room thought we were going to do it. But today, it's the most important thing in the world that we do it, and we do it today, and we do it in an emergency, and it's done this week. That's crazy, frankly. But if we're going to do it, let's put some reporting requirements and let's put an opportunity for the future legislature to take a look at it and not simply enshrine it as a permanent policy. And so what this amendment does is it would require the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy to report to the Legislative Policy Committee that represents this General Assembly of the number of immigrants without legal residency status in the United States who have been convicted of a crime in our state and sentenced to a term of imprisonment of at least 10 years. Serious crimes, serious criminals. So when we sit here on this floor, when we go through the debates on the Judiciary Committee and their coordinate committee across the hallway, people know. People know. Because ultimately what you're doing with this bill, we believe is, and I think I can tell you that apparently people in the federal government believe this evening, that what you're doing is creating a de facto, if not a de jure, sanctuary state. And you should be able to evaluate what those policies really wreak upon the citizenry. You should be able to say, because we've created a jurisdiction that for so many reasons becomes a haven, not only for lawful, good, decent, honest immigrants who come to this country illegally, but also for those who come here to commit crime. or to continue a career of crime. And so the amendment requires that that information be produced and that we come back here and that this bill has a 2-year sunset and has to be reauthorized by this General Assembly. And at the end of 2 years, you can say, you know, it turned out we didn't have very many illegal immigrants in Maryland that were convicted of very serious crimes and sentenced for very long sentences. And so as a result, maybe this makes sense to continue on. Maybe we should continue to be a little bit softer, to be a little less cooperative. It turns out crime committed in these circumstances not as bad as what people thought because we heard one terrible story or 2 terrible stories. But if it turns out that in fact there are a significant, substantial number of serious convictions, long-term convictions for individuals who should never be here under federal law, then maybe we need to look to be getting them out when they're charged, to be getting them out at the first opportunity rather than after the fact when someone has been grievously injured, when someone has been raped, when someone has been murdered, when some terrible thing has happened to our citizens, to your neighbors, and we could say to ourselves, gee, maybe we've gone too far and we could fix that. That's what the amendment does. It requires information. It requires a 2-year period for the rule to operate, the law to operate, and then it requires for the legislature to take a very hard look at that information accurately, honestly, and if the weight of this body believes, hey, it's not a big problem, so be it. You reauthorize the law and it continues forward. But if you look at it and go, my goodness, that is too many people who should never lawfully be in our country and in our state that are committing serious crimes and being convicted of them, and we're paying for them to be in our prisons for 10 years or more, maybe there's a better way. Maybe this law went too far. That's all it does. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. The floor leader, please. Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
So with respect to this amendment, I am looking at the request being information provided by GOCAP on the number of immigrants without legal residency status in the U.S. who have committed a crime in the state and sentenced. Well, I will tell you that ICE already publishes and reports and publishes annually statistics on the number of immigrants they arrest, detain, and remove. So that information is already out there and available to us if we so choose to read it. Also, I wanted to mention that we don't usually, this is a technicality, but I just want to bring it up, that we don't usually have I just want to make sure I get the term correctly, that we don't usually have a bill effective for 2 years from the date that it's enacted. If I'm reading, hold on, my eyes are not working anymore. So for a 2-year period is where I was going with that. I'm sorry. My apologies, but my eyes were playing tricks on me there. So anyway, I just wanted to bring up those 2 points. 1, we already have it available through ICE. 2, this is going to be an overwhelming amount of data for GOCAP to receive. And 3, they would have to get this information from the police, and keep in mind this would be a form of self-reporting, so it would be inaccurate. I prefer that we actually, in this case, use ICE's information since they have it already and since they are the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. So I think it would be smarter to actually get the information from the agency that is tasked to handle the legal status of residents in the United States.
Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I would respond as best I can seriatim to those positions. With respect to we're going to use ICE's data, the bill was going to prohibit ICE's data really capturing what I'm trying to capture. So ICE's data, from what I understand, is going to tell us who they have detained and deported. But the individuals that I'm talking about are going to be illegal immigrants who are convicted of a serious crime here and sentenced to 10 years in jail, and we're going to put them in jail, and the bill says we're not going to notify ICE or communicate with ICE about deporting them until after their sentence is over, which means that none of those individuals would be captured in ICE's information unless they just happen to get them through some other methodology. So that doesn't really make sense in the big picture. When we say that this will require a substantial amount of collection of information for GOCAP, then what that suggests to me is a tacit acknowledgement that there's a substantial amount of illegal immigrants committing a substantial amount of crimes, and that information will take a long time to collect and collate. And if that's the case, well, that's what people get paid for. We should know that sitting here. We shouldn't just be legislating based upon stories. We got some horrible stories to tell. You've all heard them tonight. Horrible, stomach churning. Go home at night and think about it with your spouse, your kids, what has happened to people in this state. And is it okay? Of course not. But we also want hard data. We also want to know, are we becoming so welcoming to individuals who would take advantage of our good faith, here illegally, commit serious crimes, get sentenced for 10 years or more, that we need to be less welcoming to those individuals, and a message needs to be sent firmly and soundly. Do not come here if you are going to commit crimes, because we are going to work with the appropriate authorities to make sure you do not stay here. That is the purpose of the amendment, and I would request to move the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? The clerk will take the call. There being 89 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I have an amendment at the desk 623628/1.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We've heard a lot of talk
Thank
today and in the last couple days about the federal government withholding funds from the state of Maryland. The federal government, whether you like them or not, they are in charge of a lot of things, and they're in charge of how to dispense their funds, and they're in charge of the methodologies that they try to do so. We want to fight that. Maybe sometimes that's smart, maybe sometimes it's not. The amendment basically suggests that the Attorney General shall determine whether the federal government designates the state of Maryland as a sanctuary jurisdiction, and if by doing so, they would strip by operation of law, as upheld by a competent court, funds that would go to your taxpayers in mind, to your constituents in mind. Sometimes states go in a direction that the federal government does not want them to go, and the federal government induces behavior by saying we tie it to our purse strings. You know, things like speed limits and laws for how old or how young you can be in order to have alcoholic drinks. Those are both examples of the federal government telling the states, hey, you can legislate these things, but if you legislate them in such a direction, we're not going to give you federal transportation funds anymore. And all the states come in line. And you may or may not like it. I know many of you don't, but the federal government may have the power to say, we've determined that you are a sanctuary state, and as a result, we're not going to give you certain types of funding. And the amendment has it built in before somebody says that blasted Trump, he'll just do it, and that's wrong. The amendment says that the decision of the federal government to withhold funding from the state of Maryland, is if a determination is made as a result of this legislation that we are a sanctuary state, must be upheld by a court of competent jurisdiction. Can't just be President Trump says it on his Twitter blog. It has to be upheld. And if that happens, if it is determined that Maryland has become a sanctuary state, many of you want to embrace that with open arms. And if it happens that we are determined to be a sanctuary state and we lose federal funding as a result, this act is abrogated. This act is abrogated. We come in here and fight. We come in here and we talk about the developmental disabilities. We come in here and we talk about we need mass transit. We come in here and we talk about the blueprint and the billions of dollars we need. But you're going to leave money on the table from the federal government for this, if it happens, if, that should not occur. The amendment doesn't commit you to a single thing. The amendment doesn't say you're agreeing that we are or not a sanctuary state. It says if that is ultimately a determination made by a competent court, and if we're going to lose money, the act doesn't exist anymore. Because you got to get your priorities straight. And that should be our priority, is protecting those monies, protecting those federal funds to the greatest extent possible if they're going to be taken away because you've chosen to become a sanctuary state. And I think that's what you all want to do. It sounds real good to those activists. My goodness, they lap it up. Yeah, sanctuary state. And they don't think about the consequences. People in this room should start thinking about consequences. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
Colleagues, I'm obviously going to ask you to reject this amendment, but believe it or not, I actually like it. I actually want our Attorney General to be monitoring whether the federal government is withholding funds on the basis of designating Maryland a sanctuary state. And if this bill passes, that would be a factually inaccurate designation, and we should sue the federal government for withholding those funds. I have a bill for that. Yes, that's right. Because, as I've said many times, if we pass this bill, it requires the state to notify ICE about every single felon convicted and held in a state prison here. Every single one. That is not the definition of a sanctuary state, a state that is refusing to participate in these activities. The bill requires it. So if the federal government does in fact label Maryland a sanctuary state and take away our money on that basis, we're going to end up in court, and you better believe there's a lawsuit. In fact, we authorize the Attorney General to sue on these types of matters, and we now have a separate debt collection bill that allows us to help collect funds to recover in these matters. On the point of your amendment, though, it's not necessary because this is going to happen anyway.
Recognizing the minority whip.
So we like to give real life examples here. So on October 31st of last year, Baltimore County was a sanctuary county. And your Democrat county executive, in order to save $400 million, which is 10% of the Baltimore County budget, entered in a memorandum of understanding with the federal government to become not a sanctuary county. So this is real. And the minority leader is putting in the bill because, I'm sorry, putting in the amendment because this bill is a sanctuary state bill. So congratulations, you did it. I know you wanted to do it. You know, the activists are watching at home, but you did it. After all these years of making threats and this and that, congratulations. Maryland officially will be a sanctuary state, I'm guessing in about 11/15. So this amendment, it's a good guess. This amendment is about our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. You going to build the key bridge on your good looks? No. You're going to need those federal dollars, right? These policies are going to have repercussions. Making Maryland a sanctuary state will further bankrupt us if we're not bankrupt already. So this is a good amendment. This is an unfortunate bill that appears to be imminently about to pass, but I think it's going to have extensive repercussions from the federal government because you are impacting the federal operation, which is enforcement of immigration in this country, whether you like it or dislike it. That's not what this is about. What it's about is that you believe as a state that you can stop the federal government with whatever you want. Everybody in here wants to be something other than what you are, which is a state representative. And it's disappointing. And you don't have to look any further than October 31st, 2025 in Baltimore County, where the federal government listed Baltimore County as a sanctuary county, said we're going to withhold $400 million, and your previous colleague, maybe she was in the Senate, entered a deal, a memorandum of understanding to take them off the list so they can save 10% of their operating revenue. That's where we're headed, folks. Bankruptcy, and SB 791's the ticket. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a question for the floor leader.
The floor leader, please.
Hoping it's the majority leader. Oh, good.
Majority leader.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right. So I guess the nexus of this bill is that our local law enforcement they're somehow going to be penalized financially if they cooperate with federal ICE, right? Is that correct?
No, that's not in the bill.
No, that's not in the bill at all. So what is the consequence to our local?
When in the last round of questioning about the penalty in the bill, the penalty is simply injunctive relief. It's, in other words, they're telling you to stop doing the thing that you're doing.
Oh, that's it?
That's it.
So if they choose to participate in federal law enforcement or with federal law enforcement, we're just going to slap their hands? Is that it? Is that
we will take them to court and enjoin them from doing that.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you.
Recognizing the delegate from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to further drive home the point of what the minority whip was talking about there, that is so much of a real-life scenario, in fact, that just last year I received a call from the Baltimore County Executive's office asking for help with Congressman Harris to get Baltimore County off of that list because they were so worried about all of the federal funding that we were going to lose in Baltimore County. So this isn't a hypothetical scenario. This is a real scenario where hundreds of millions of dollars were potentially at risk in Baltimore County that Congressman Harris was able to help in that scenario. It's one county. It's hundreds of millions of dollars in Baltimore County. It's likely much more than that for the entire state of Maryland. So this isn't just a hypothetical scenario. I can tell you with firsthand knowledge that this is a real thing that counties are concerned about. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Recognizing the lady from Hartford County.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
You're
I just
welcome.
want to really quickly ask my very good friend, the majority leader, a couple questions because my mind got a little distracted and maybe I didn't understand what the penalties are.
He is up.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
So I'm on page 8 of the final reprint, and it says here on line 14 that the district court commissioner or judge may consider the this is the wrong spot. Where should I be looking for the penalties if there's a violation?
If you look right
of
above
this?
there, sorry, Madam Speaker.
Oh, go ahead. Where am I supposed to look?
They were struck. The damages was struck on page 8.
Right. So so that's where it used to be, and now, where in here does it say? It's just injunctive relief? Is that? Can you tell me which page that is?
Yes, the injunctive relief, page 5.
Okay, page 5 of 8. Oh.
Yep, 11 to 14.
11 to 14. Okay, in an action brought under paragraph 1 of this subsection, a court may issue a temporary, preliminary, or permanent injunctive relief to prevent an act that would constitute a violation. So, okay. All right, so let's say that a jurisdiction ran into this situation. An individual was continuing, for example, to contact ICE directly and let them know who they were detaining, who was being arrested, who was being held. Then the state, so the Attorney General.
It would be enjoined, and they would comply or not comply.
Okay.
And if they didn't comply, then there might be contempt. I mean, we again, hopefully that's not where we're going.
Right, that was what I was wondering. So if they don't comply, and then they don't comply again, we're looking at contempt. And is contempt a jailable offense?
It could be.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure. So thank you very much for answering my question. So
it's part of how we maintain rule of law.
I'm fine with contempt, but I want to make sure that people understand what that means. So it's not just injunctive relief, it is also potentially contempt, which can be jailable. So a judge who has ordered a jurisdiction or an individual in a jurisdiction, you must stop doing that. And the jurisdiction says, I don't think this is good for public safety. I am not going to stop. the judge can arrest them and put them in jail. That is in this bill, whether it's explicitly written or not. It is implicit because that is the way contempt works.
Well, Madam Speaker, that's the way the American legal system works.
That's totally
and that
fine.
is a feature of how we enforce the law. So if a law enforcement officer decides to disobey the law, in this country, they're supposed to be held to the same standard as everybody else. And if they ignore a court order, they may be held in contempt of court. If they continue to ignore the court order, and this is applied to gubernatorial administrations in this state routinely on audit findings. So this is a normal feature for how we enforce the law.
I completely agree with everything that my friend from Montgomery County just said. I concur. That is how it's done. I want everyone on here to understand that that means that also is going to apply in this situation, and people could actually go to jail if they don't follow this rule. So it's not just injunctive relief. They could be looking at prison.
The clerk will take the call.
Madam Speaker?
I mean, the roll, sorry. Has everyone recorded their vote? The clerk will take the call. There being 92 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I was giving them a second to keep it down. Go ahead.
I thought it was because my leg fell asleep.
No.
I've got an amendment at the desk.
Okay.
823326.
Amendment number 1.
Move so much be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Let's listen, please.
This amendment is quite
Thank you.
simple, no legalese. It's just to change the name of the bill. I think we would all agree in here one of the most difficult things we have to do as elected officials is gain the trust of the public. It's very difficult to do, and that's because for centuries politicians have lied to people. But I don't think that means we should keep up that tradition in here. And that starts with us just being honest when we're in this chamber and when we're naming our bills. We should name our bills not what we want the public to think that they do, but what they actually do. Let me give you a few examples of my favorites. The balanced budget referendum of 2020. Well, we already had a balanced budget amendment. We put it in November 7th, 1916. What should that have been called? Governor, hold my beer. We'll balance the Budget and Appropriations Committee from here on. The Climate Solutions Now Act. Oh, maybe that should have been Pay More, Get Less Energy Act. The Clean Energy Jobs Act. How about the Skyrocketing Energy Cost Act? Here's my favorite from this year, the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. How about the Ratepayer Piggy Bank Shakedown Act? I think they're all accurate. And now we have the Community Trust Act. And what does this do? Creates a major divide between law enforcement and federal officials working together to protect our communities from violent criminals. We've laid out 17 amendments, if I counted them right so far. All of them with the intent of protecting our communities and building trust. This isn't trust. So this amendment says exactly what this is.
Patrick.
To rename it to the Maryland Criminal Alien Protection Act, because that's what we're doing. And that's sad. Sounds to me through a lot of the arguments that's what you want. And if that's really what you want, then name it what you want. Stop deceiving the public. We have a horrible habit of doing that in here. I just gave you a few examples. it's hard to get their trust. Respect them enough not to lie to them anymore. With that, I push the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Okay, go ahead. Let's go. Just wanted to know if you were awake. Are you awake? All right. The clerk, you owe me a chocolate? Get me half the chocolate. Okay. The clerk would take the call. There being 93 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam
Let's
Speaker.
listen.
Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you very
Speaker.
much.
Can you share some of that chocolate with me?
I do. I'll give you
All
some.
right. I have a an amendment at the desk. It's 113221.
Amendment number 1.
Moves to be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
Thank you kindly. I have a question for the floor leader.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to see if you could read part of the bill along with me here. I'm looking at page 5, line 4, and I'll read it for the body. A state correctional facility shall provide written notice to federal immigration authorities of the release of an individual who is the subject of an active immigration detainer within 48 hours before the release of the individual. Within 48 hours before, could that be 46 hours?
Yeah, this was the subject of the discussion that we just had with the delegate from Carroll County.
But that was not resolved. That's my understanding.
Well, I thought I resolved it pretty well with my arguments, but I guess you didn't think so. But basically, where we left that is, the question you raise is a valid one. What are we intending? And I guess I'll just state for the record that it's intended to be as close to 2 days as possible. And the give or take is handled because, again, if ICE notifies the detention facility that they intend to come pick someone up, the detention facility is going to wait for ICE to come get that person, even if it's 2 days and 2 hours, or, you get my drift. So
I do get your
we
drift.
live with that. We live with that being the setup because we don't want the 2 days to become a year, right? And that's the possibility if you make it an unbounded time on the other end of it. And we don't want to suggest that we're holding people unconstitutionally longer than their term of confinement. That could make the law facially improper.
I do get your drift, but I also have my judiciary cap, and I know that words have meanings, and I know that within 48 hours before could mean 47 hours, could mean 47 minutes, could mean 47 seconds. Is that, just to state it simply, is that correct?
It could happen.
Because the word technically does not exist in the law. It either is or it is not. And as I read this, could be 48 hours, could be 48 minutes, could be 48 seconds. So I have an amendment here, and I think it's clarifying. I'd like to read it to you. It changes this section, and it breaks it out in 2 parts. And it states that, that the federal immigration authorities shall be notified when the state correctional facility identifies an individual who is the subject of an active immigration detainer, and at least 48 hours before the release of an individual who is the subject of an active immigration detainer. And I think, look, I think if this is just written a little bit unclearly, it's something we could clarify right here. If it's just written poorly, I think we could clean that up easy, but I think we could all agree that within 48 hours before, there is a big problem with the way these detainers work. Because as you know, if a judicial action is taken and a judge says, well, okay, this person's found innocent, and there's still an active detainer, that person's walking instantly. So we've already got technical problems here. But if local authorities are doing their due diligence and trying to act in good faith, we want to clarify that we're actively communicating with the federal government the fact that we do have someone who has an active detainer and we're trying to act in good faith. So I think this is much in line with the intent of the bill and very much clarifying. And I'd submit it hopefully as a friendly amendment.
Unfortunately, my friend, it is not. It duplicates the correction that the Carroll County delegate was attempting to make for the reasons I just stated. We looked at that logic and we affirmatively rejected it and chose this language instead. The other thing I'll point out is it's a little bit unnecessary what you're doing here. You have front-to-end notification here, and the front side notification is already happening the minute they stick their fingerprints in there, which they all will if they're being booked into a state correctional facility. So ICE is getting notified passively on the front end anyway, and if that individual has an active detainer out for them, they're certainly going to match that data up, again, well before the 47 or 46 hours. So I think this is unnecessary.
Understood, but I do think it is prudent. This has been the release in good faith to the federal government has been an issue at question, and we've released folks who have committed really heinous crimes back onto our streets. So I think this is really a technical fix that has significant practical purposes, and for that reason, I press the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Has everyone recorded their vote? All right. The clerk will take the call. There being 93 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title? Recognizing the gentleman for Southern Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
Amendment at the desk, Amendment 793324/1.
Amendment number 1.
Said be considered reading of the amendment.
So order.
Colleagues, there was a debate not too long ago, maybe 10 or 15 minutes ago, that really caught my ear. And between the lady from Harford County and the majority leader that talked about police officers accidentally being thrown in jail over this legislation, whether they might not comply or if they're inadvertently violated it, that they could be prosecuted for this. And I think that's crazy and certainly not by accident. We should be backing our law enforcement officers. So this amendment is really simple. It says an employee or agent of a local correction facility may not be fired or criminally prosecuted for not complying with this requirement. And this makes a lot of sense. I can see a police officer, maybe he makes an arrest on a DWI, just calls a ICE office on a hunch. See if there's an active detainer. We used to call it good police work. Now we're stopping that and putting that artificial barrier in the way of the police officer from doing his job. The last thing that should happen is that police officer should be fired or jailed for doing what we used to call good police work. And I move the amendment forward, Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
Speaker, we have a thing that it's an objection that's asked and answered, and I will say I urge you to resist this amendment. It's been asked and answered, already presented for the reasons that have been presented already on the discussion by the majority leader. Thank you.
Recognizing the maker of the motion.
So, question for the committee chairman.
Committee chair.
So, an officer, after we pass this legislation, it goes into effect. If he picks up the phone and calls ICE and says, hey, I think I have a suspect here with a detainer, he can be prosecuted and have administrative discipline exercised onto him. Isn't that so?
No.
No?
No.
What would happen if he violated this law? Nothing?
There are no penalties in the bill at all. There is, so that's that. So there's no penalties in the bill. There's nothing in the bill that says you get arrested. What the woman from Hartford County was alluding to was that if you get a court order, you disobey the court order, then you could be held in contempt.
So what happens to a police officer? Because I know that's what's driving this legislation. We had some sheriffs that didn't think the 287G program, even though it was stopped legislatively, they said they were going to continue with it, and that's what triggered a budget amendment to threaten them with funding. And now we have this piece of legislation up here. So what happens if there's 9 sheriffs that were going to continue to do the 287G program, get this piece of legislation, they have a suspect in custody, and they pick up the phone and find out and call ICE to see if they have a local detainer on that prisoner that they have in custody. What happens?
I wasn't saying anything because nothing happens.
So the sheriffs, everything that we've been through tonight, nothing. They can
happens.
just violate the law and nothing would happen to them.
Nothing would happen unless.
Unless what?
And that unless is in the bill where the Attorney General or an individual could bring a civil action. And they could do that.
So through a civil action, they could be fired?
No, there would be an injunctive relief. We've said this a few times, injunctive relief, and all that would do is say, whatever agency that is, stop doing that.
Well, that's great to know. Madam Speaker, on the amendment, I would still press the amendment forward because this puts it in law that nothing would happen. We're going to say to our police officers that we're not going to criminally prosecute them and that we're not going to terminate them if they do try to work with federal agencies to make Maryland safe. So with that, I press the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
Does the lady want to explain her vote?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Recognizing the lady from Hartford County.
Thank you so much,
You're
Madam Speaker.
welcome.
Okay, so for everybody watching at home, again, there's nothing specific to the bill about criminally charging our corrections officers. However, so that when folks ask you back home, what happens if a corrections officer violates the injunctive relief, just like in any court case, if they are held in contempt, they can be jailed. So yes, there is a pathway to jailing a corrections officer that is not obeying the court order. So while there's no immediate arresting of them, if they do not follow the order, they can go to jail.
Clerk would take the call. There being 91 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill or to its title?
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I have one last amendment at the desk. It's 543022.
Amendment number 1.
Moves to be considered the reading of the amendment.
So order.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
sorry, I was
It's
listening to
okay.
the clerk.
I'm tired too.
Listening to the clerk, sorry.
Of all the arguments made tonight, I think the most compelling was made by the gentle lady from Carroll County about infractions of rape and sexual assault against Marylanders and her concerns about criminals released back into the community. It was said on the floor tonight that that is unlikely. But that is something that actually occurs and occurs frequently. I'd like to read about one of those cases. A Montgomery County rape suspect is free despite a request from ICE that he remain in custody, officials said on Monday. According to Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials, they lodged a detainer on August 12th with the Montgomery County Detention Center following the arrest of Salvadoran national Rodrigo Castro Montejo. The jail, however, declined to honor the detainer, ICE says, and they let Castro Montejo go. A statement from the Montgomery County indicates that they notified ICE when Castro Montejo was arrested and told them he was being processed for release after he posted bail. So it is something that happens. It happens frequently. If you watch the cases that happen in the state, around the state, for some reason there tends to be a high frequency of sexual assault cases pointed out by the gentle lady from Baltimore County, and I find that especially egregious. What the amendment does is it prevents pretrial release, bail, and bond for those who have a detainer issued and are considered covered individuals over the bill. That would be those charged with a felony, an offense for which registration as a sex offender is required, or have been previously convicted of an offense in another state for which the defendant was sentenced to at least 5 years of incarceration. These are serious offenses, and if we have someone who is here illegally, has a detainer issued, and has been arrested for these egregious charges in this bill, which I think we all agree, in those cases a person should be detained for, there really is no reason to have yet another catch and release, let's protect the criminal first, bail, bond, pretrial release that puts that person back in the community. These are serious offenses. We should stop promoting this rape culture. We should, young women feel very insecure right now seeing these headlines come out. And I think we should take action when we know we have these people who have convicted these or are suspected to have convicted these egregious crimes in our custody, and also have a detainer issued that we hold them until we've processed them for that crime. And I'd move the amendment.
Can I send the floor leader?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'd like to answer this in two parts. One is the amendment applies to both district court commissioners and judges. We cannot restrict the ability of a judge to consider a fact-specific release determination because of the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits excessive bail, which has been interpreted to mean that judges have to be able to consider the facts of a case. There are two things they can consider: whether the person's a flight risk, whether they're a threat to public safety. So you'll notice in the amendment, all the other laws surrounding it, any restrictions are just on commissioners, so we cannot restrict judges in that way. With regard to commissioners, I think the bill has struck a balance which says a judge can consider immigration status if it is relevant to those considerations of flight risk and public safety. Because for every story that we've heard, these horrible stories, there's a story that we've also read of someone who has been in this country for decades, has raised children in the country, has roots in the community, owns a business, and all these ties are also relevant to flight risk. And so saying that the judge and the district court commissioner can never consider that they have to automatically detain the person, I think would be a gross misunderstanding of the ties that people have in this country regardless of their immigration status. So I urge the body to reject the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Clerk,
Madam Speaker?
The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
I'm letting you have it. Okay? And explaining your vote, the lady from Hartford.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
People who are here illegally and have a detainer on them are automatically a flight risk. These people are a flight risk, and I'll tell you the example that I told you before. Rachel Morin's killer. Not only was he a flight risk from his own country, and he fled here after he murdered a woman, then he committed a horrible assault and home invasion in LA, and he was a flight risk there, and he flew over here to this sanctuary state. And then he committed another brutal murder. And then, guess what? I don't want to shock you guys, but I'll tell you the end of the story. He fled here too. You know why? Because he's a flight risk. Because criminals who commit crimes here that have detainers are flight risks automatically, and they should never, never be released pretrial.
The clerk will take the call. There being 91 votes in the negative, the amendment fails. Are there any additional amendments to the bill as to its title?
Madam Speaker.
Recognizing the gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I think I'd like to chair the committee. There's been a lot of floor leaders, so I'm not sure, but maybe the chair of the Judiciary Committee. Just to
The chair of the committee?
I just really have I don't have an amendment. I have a question. We determined that there's no.
Is your do you
I'm
mind?
sorry.
Yeah.
Like that?
Yes.
It works.
You okay? The delegate from Prince George's says teaching you how to hold it. Go ahead, delegate, teach him.
I don't think so. So anyway, I think this is practice for what we're going to have to do on Monday night. So we're getting used to being here this late. So we determined, the delegate from behind me asked about, is there any funding that's going to be withheld if there was a violation? I think the answer to that, the bill is silent on that. There's no funding that's going to be held back to the jurisdictions or to the sheriff's office, correctional facilities. Is that my understanding?
I can't speak to that because I'm not sure, because it's not in the bill. I will say that, you know, Judiciary has been accused of coming up with solving the problem, but not the money that goes with it. So I can't speak to money. I'm sorry.
Okay. So thank you. And that's the only question I had for you. But, you know, sadly, we spent a lot of time here tonight on a bill that, should it pass, the governor's going to have to veto it. On this past week, he was down in Wacomico County. Go to his Facebook page. He put it up there 2 days ago. And here's what he said in Wacomico County. I have no patience for violent offenders. I have no patience for people who will target our friends and families on the Eastern Shore, in Western Maryland, or anywhere in between, and think that they will get away with it. None. Accountability is coming to everyone who can hear my voice. I am grateful to be in a room full of people, and this was a room full of law enforcement correctional facilities, correctional officers, who don't just feel the same way, but because of the actions they do every single day and are making sure that justice is being done. You have my pledge that law enforcement agencies will stay funded. You have my pledge that law enforcement officers will stay supported. You have our pledge that in Wacomico and throughout the state, we will continue to deliver results that the people deserve. And I'm going to repeat, you have my pledge that law enforcement officers will stay supported. Those were the words last week, Wacomico County. Not my words, but the words of Governor Moore. So if his words are truthful, I would expect that he will veto this bill should it make it to his desk. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Seeing no other questions or amendment, the bill is actually on third reading and final passage. The clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker?
To explain my vote, Madam Speaker.
1 second. Recognizing the lady from Harper.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I really appreciated getting the opportunity to hear the words of our governor from just feels like moments ago. And I'm just going to say a warning. The public will likely hold him responsible if he signs this bill and one of our Marylanders is murdered. The public is going to, they may not hold each and every one of you responsible. They may not hold the leadership responsible, but they will hold Governor Moore responsible. So I would caution him on signing this bill, because the first woman who is slaughtered in our state because of the policies in this bill will be in his watch, the blood will be on his hands, and the people of Maryland and the entire country will hold him responsible. I urge him to veto this bill.
Recognizing the majority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
And I want to thank all of our colleagues. I think tonight really illuminated what this session, but also what this moment in our history is about. A core question that we often have to ask ourselves every generation is who belongs here? This bill, Community Trust Act, is about ensuring that we have trust within our system. Our immigration system in this country, unfortunately, not because of any actions of anyone in this room, is a patchwork of policy that is extremely confusing. And right now we have an administration that wants to do everything that they can to push forward a really aggressive campaign against our immigrant neighbors. What this bill does, what the Community Trust Act does, is ensure that we have one system around how we deal with corrections, how we deal with folks that are convicted of the most heinous of crimes. This bill builds trust. This bill puts us on a pathway for us to be able to really get our communities together, and I'm really thankful for the work that has been done to get us this far. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
The bill has a very good chance upon passage of construing Maryland as a sanctuary state, because what it does, it is expressly forbids our law enforcement and correctional officers and officials from coordinating, communicating, cooperating with federal authorities under the color of law when individuals have been arrested, charged, and detained. We will not cooperate with you. We will protect this person. We will not communicate with you. We will protect this person. We will not collaborate with you. We will protect this person. Who is this person? They are unlawfully in the United States, subject to the jurisdiction of ICE or other federal authorities to detain and to deport, and they are a charged criminal, including the worst of the worst charged criminals. You won't even give us that. I have to share some of the thoughts of the gentlelady from Harford County that if tomorrow, because apparently this is such an important thing, wasn't an important thing 4 days ago. And all I will tell you sometimes is, in all honesty, I walked across Lawyers Mall, as we all did a few days ago, and there were a group of individuals there, and they have their freedom of speech and constitutional rights to be there. God bless them. They were screaming at the top of their lungs, "What do we want?" Didn't hear the next part. When do we want it? Now! Found out today what they wanted. They wanted this bill. When they get it? Now. This is not a considered room of legislators making policy and thinking about things long term. We are governed by those outside the hall. And those outside the hall do not have to live with the consequences. And if someone is released, if someone is not turned over to ICE for whatever reason that would have been prior to the operation of this law, and they kill, they rape, they harm one of your constituents, we are complicit in that because we did this.
Time is up.
Madam
Thank you.
Speaker.
Recognizing the delegate from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
And I would like to say thank you for your graciousness and the time that you've allowed us to have. We're very grateful for
My
that.
pleasure.
So this is the Maryland Sanctuary State Act of 2026. And I will tell you that polling is against protecting criminal illegal immigrants. First, illegal immigrants are here illegally. They've broken our laws by either overstaying visas or entering our country illegally. When those who are here illegally and are wanted by ICE for immigration violations, they will get due process by ICE for that crime. Third, we're talking about this because Joe Biden let in over 10 million illegal immigrants into our country, unchecked, unvetted, just let in. This bill protects illegal immigrants who have committed other crimes. Laken Riley would be alive today had her killer been turned over. Jose Ibarra entered illegally in 2022. In 2023, was arrested in New York City for driving a scooter with a child without a helmet and not having a driver's license. He was released. In October of 2023, he was arrested in Athens, Georgia for shoplifting and stealing merchandise from Walmart. He was released. Right after that, he brutally murdered her. Laken Riley was a nursing student jogging on a trail who was attacked, beaten with a rock, causing severe head trauma and skull disfigurement. She was asphyxiated, strangled, sexually assaulted.
Ladies, time is up.
And because of Laken Riley, we should be voting against this bill. Thank you.
You're welcome. Recognizing the gentleman from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was going to
You're
speak,
welcome.
but I had a conversation in the back that particularly motivated me to speak tonight. First and foremost, Madam Speaker, as a member of the minority party, all I can ever ask for is fairness. And tonight, you've facilitated this debate, allowed us to make our case for our positions. We may not agree, and math is math, but thank you for allowing us to, and following the rules, and allowing us to have a voice tonight. So I appreciate it very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
With that being said, in addition to that, no, not with that
The
being said.
minority whip, the minority whip is ready.
The wrong transition word, I apologize. I'm afraid this bill, the net effect of this legislation is going to have the opposite effect of what you hope it will, the same way the 287G bill has already had in Hartford County. ICE, for the first time in 10 years, is already going into the communities that this bill is seeking to protect. They're already going in, and you're already seeing collateral deportations, right? The entire debate tonight, we're not talking about the little old lady and the mom and the kids and all those people. We're not talking about any of those individuals. We're talking about the worst of the worst, just like the majority whip discussed. We're talking about the exact same people, right? But what's going to happen is now there's a bullseye on Maryland, right? The White House is already tweeting about it. They're already tweeting about it. And what's going to happen is now they're going to flood Maryland, they're going to go in these communities, and you're going to see mass collateral deportations, and I fear this is going to have unintended consequences. And so with that, I will be voting red on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Thank you for your kind words. The minority whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
Well, I think this makes us officially a sanctuary state. It does. And I think there's going to be severe consequences for it. I think we've sacrificed public safety. I think we've sacrificed funding at a time when we need it most. And I think we've put the cart before the horse. We offered 17 amendments. One technical amendment was taken. The other 16 amendments were really just about public safety. And I think we're going to see severe consequences of this. I'm really disappointed. I really am, because, you know, for 7 years, serving in this House is my 8th year. We've seen bills here and here, but this one takes the cake. We are officially saying that we refuse to cooperate with the federal government on something that the federal government is exclusively in control of. And that's going to put a major bullseye on our backs, and I think our citizens are going to suffer for it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Recognizing the lady from Frederick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're
and
welcome.
I echo my colleagues' thanks of how you handled this debate tonight. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And as admitted tonight on the floor, we do not know the level of disruption that this emergency bill will cause. But in the words of the Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin, we do know what disruption some of the other things that we've done have caused. So she said that now Maryland sanctuary politicians are playing Russian roulette with American lives by outlawing cooperation with ICE and forcing law enforcement to release criminals from their jails into our communities and to perpetrate more crimes and create more victims. Unfortunately, the only consequence will be the continued murder, rape, assault, robbery, and carnage of American lives, and I fear that that is what we have done more of tonight. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Recognizing the gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I feel like this body's in like a toxic relationship with our law enforcement officers and our law enforcement agencies. You know, in 2021, we replaced the law enforcement Bill of Rights with police accountability, and we passed all these criminal justice bills that took all these tools out of their toolbox. And now we're sending a message to law enforcement that we can't trust them to work with our federal partners. You know, these guys keep getting beat up and beat up and beat up, men and women in law enforcement, and this is becoming embarrassing, to be quite honest. And I want to look at, look in the camera and just tell our law enforcement officers, we're here to support you guys. We're very thankful for what you all do, and on behalf of this body, I apologize to all of our law enforcement agencies across the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Recognizing the lady from Baltimore County. I'm sorry, the gentleman from Baltimore County.
Thank you, Madam
You're
Speaker.
welcome.
And I don't have much more to add other than to the good minority whip who covered my points exactly. I mean, we are putting politics in this bill ahead of public safety. I mean, somebody that is a correctional officer, after we've made an arrest, can't even ask somebody that's been arrested whether they're a citizen. I mean, you have a situation where we're not going to cooperate with federal law enforcement whatsoever. How do they make public safety better in the state of Maryland? It doesn't. We have a point that was brought up in an amendment. We have the purse strings basically we're saying here that we're going to choose politics over the purse strings, a state that has already proven financially we're in a hole. I mean, all of this, most importantly, is being done on behalf of people, whether you like it or not, are in this country illegally. We are willing to jeopardize the future of Maryland, whether it comes to funding, whether it comes to public safety, all on behalf of those who are in this country illegally. Thank you, Madam.
You're welcome. Recognizing the delegate from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And
You're welcome.
again, same. Thank you for giving us a voice. We do appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I'm very grateful. But I am disappointed in this bill for several reasons. I guess two reasons. I think it does put a target on our children and our women, and I've been in that situation a couple times. It's not good. And, the victims, not only do they go through the actual crime, but then they live it over and over and over. And every night, you have no idea what they're going through. And I think this bill, because a lot of these, these heinous crimes that we talked about in a lot of our amendments, and yes, they have been, the ones, true facts that we talked about tonight were about, illegals with multiple crimes, and then they committed more. And for us to allow them to just go out and be and out there roaming amongst citizens, it's just bizarre to me, and it's crazy. And again, what the other gentleman said, what we're saying about our law enforcement is pretty upsetting. So that's why I have a red up there, and I'm proud of having that red. I wish I had a little bit more. Thank you.
You're welcome. Recognizing the gentleman from Baltimore County, then the gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're
I
welcome.
wanted to explain my red vote today. I actually agree with the majority whip. We come to these points in times where we talk about what our country is about, and I wanted to tell one last story about a Maryland girl here today. Members of the Judicial Services Section have located and arrested Franklin Argueta Marquez, aged 28, of no fixed address, who was wanted in connection with 2 counts of rape and sexual offense of a 13-year-old girl whom initially met online when she was 12 years old. Argueta Marquez first reached out to the victim by contacting her through direct messaging on a social media app. He engaged in friendly conversations, and after a few weeks, he was able to convince her to sneak out of her house. He would park near her house, and she would go to his car, where he eventually raped her. ERO Baltimore lodged an immigration detainer against him in 2023 with the Charles County Detention Center. The detention center refused to honor the detainer and released Argueta. On February 12th, the Department of Justice immigration judge Baltimore ordered Argueta removed to Guatemala. The Charles County convicted Argueta of rape. In the second degree, sentenced him to 20 years. He walked out with 190 days served. So in this country in 2026, you can come here illegally, groom a 12-year-old, rape her, get sentenced to 20 years, serve 190 days, and walk away scot-free. And I think this progressive path of reform is creating a state of lawlessness that makes us all unsafe. It's promoting rape culture. It's promoting grooming. It doesn't make us more safe. It doesn't make my daughter safe or any of Maryland's daughters safer. I think it's drastically harmful. That's why I'll be read today.
The gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
I guess, first of all, thank you for what you've done tonight. I appreciate it. I've
You're
listened
welcome.
to a lot of stuff, but I guess I'm kind of disappointed what's happening here. It used to be when we used to talk about crime and people breaking the law, there was accountability. And I talk a lot about accountability when I'm speaking on some things, and I'm disappointed that we are allowing people that have broken the law, and we're choosing them over people that abide by the law. Whether you like it or not, people here illegally don't belong here. But yet, we're defending them, we're defending their rights, and we're sitting back here working for ways and solutions to provide for them to get better than we get. We are here, we're the people that actually built this country, we supply this country, we support this country, and we're watching this happen in front of our eyes where we're actually choosing people that, God bless them, they're here for a reason, I understand that, but they're not here, they're not Americans yet. And I think there was a process. I guess I'm disappointed that we're doing this. I don't like to see the fact that we're picking winners and losers, and it turns out people like me are the losers. Thanks for the time.
Recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome.
Colleagues, just to wrap on this, it's been a long discussion. Look, I want to say it again one more time for the record. This is not a sanctuary bill. It is actually quite the opposite. It is mandatory notification to ICE for every single person coming out of our state prisons who are there for a serious, serious crime. This actually makes real the promise that all of the federal officials have been saying that they are going to target violent criminals. This bill only targets those violent criminals. And why would we need to do that? They are engaged in a mass deportation campaign. And let me tell you something. The 1,500-bed warehouse with no water that they are trying to build in Western Maryland is absolutely too big to possibly be for violent criminals only. The ramp up they're doing in procurement says this has nothing to do with it. And in fact, some of the commentary we just heard had nothing to do with violent criminals. It had to do with immigrants coming generally and taking resources. I think that's the other side of this conversation. And so again, we are bringing it back home. In Maryland, we are making real the promise that immigration enforcement is focused on violent criminals, but for everybody else, we have to make a decision here during the 90 days how best to protect our residents when sine die gavels us out of here. I do believe this is a balanced bill that will do that. Given everything going on, please support this bill.
The clerk would take the call. There being 92 votes in the negative, the amendment, I'm sorry. There being 92 votes in the affirmative and 37 votes in the negative, Senate Bill 791, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. This ends the work at the desk. Okay? Thank you, everyone. I know it's been a long day, a long night, but you did it, and you did it in a very civil and respectful manner. Committee announcements, appropriations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Appropriations Committee will meet at 9:45 Monday on some concurrences.
Economic matters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Economic matters, we don't have a time yet, but listen out on Monday for a voting session.
A voting session. She's tired. Environment and transportation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House Environment and Transportation Committee will meet before the fourth session in the Silver... Just kidding, guys. We'll meet at 9:45 Monday morning.
Government, labor, and elections.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. GLEE is not meeting before first session on Monday.
Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Health Committee will not be meeting before first session on Monday.
Judiciary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Judiciary will be meeting at 7:45 a.m. on. Oh, my bad. My bad. Judiciary will not be meeting. We don't have any schedule right now.
Okay, great job, Madam Chair, tonight. All right, Ways and Means.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Ways and Means Committee has no plans to meet at this time. Please stay tuned.
All right, subcommittee announcements. Seeing none. Delegation announcements. Seeing none. Caucus announcements. Seeing none. Personal guest announcements. Recognizing recognizing the Vice Chair of Appropriations.
Will everyone join me in thanking the technician up in the booth who's been with us all night and he's still up here?
Okay, who is it?
Madam Speaker?
Give me 1 second. I did not recognize the gentleman. So let me recognize you, and you try that again. Recognizing the Vice Chair of the committee.
My apologies to the Vice
It's
Chair
okay.
of Appropriations. Will everyone join me in thanking the technician up in the booth who's been videoing us all night
All
and still with us?
Woo-hoo! All right, recognizing the Vice Chair of Appropriations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to the
Welcome.
87 members of this body who played tonight, guessing the time that we would be done. And can you believe it? 16 people guessed after midnight, and 7 of you guessed 11:30 p.m. Baylor, permission to use a delegate's name.
Permission granted.
Baylor, Fair, Foley, Lopez,
get up.
Rogers, Tolles, and Tomlinsman, and I don't play Price's Rights rules. You 7-1. Congratulations.
All right. And Quorum call.
Madam Speaker?
Listen, excuse me 1 second. Before I take the quorum, you need to thank these clerks, all right? They work really hard. And also, a huge, huge shout out to the amendments office. And everyone that helped us, okay? Quorum call, let's take the roll. There being 126 members present, the House is still in session. Listen up. 1 second, please. Recognizing the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stands adjourned until Monday, April 13th at 10 o'clock a.m.
10 o'clock. Get some rest tomorrow. Great work from everyone.
March 30th.
Thank you.